All right, give me some audio there, Tim.
All right.
Tell me what you ate. Oh, let's see. I just had a patron edit their page donation from $3 a month to $5 a month.
Heck
I'm making
yeah.
an extra $2 a month right now.
Sweet.
Thank you to Christopher T. We appreciate your patronage, and I will spend that $2 very wisely. Yeah, tell me what you ate for breakfast this morning, Tim.
Nothing. What did I? No, I had coffee.
I haven't had breakfast yet either.
Well, and that's my normal. My MO is about coffee till 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and then finally have lunch.
Dude,
So.
you and I are on the exact. We're on the exact same program.
Yep.
I just, it's a good way to like restrict calories. I don't get really hungry until like 1 or 2 o'clock. So there's no need for me to just like, oh, I just feel like eating.
Exactly.
And I just, that's kind of my work time. When I wake up, I'm just slaughtering coffee and just focus as well as I can be for a severely ADHD person, you know. And then around 1 or 2 o'clock, I'll go and make some eggs and eat that.
Yeah, that's my thing. And yeah, it's at Esker, at the warehouse in Minneapolis, we're actually like, all of us are coffee snobs. So we got a burr grinder, and we buy good beans and have a couple pour over rigs there and just sit there and, you know, pound good coffee all morning.
Yeah, that's a good move, man.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. If you're going to be stuck in an office, and maybe you're stuck in a good office, but still stuck indoors all day, it's nice to have those like perks, something to kind of make the day a little bit more enjoyable or a little more special, something to look forward to.
Yep.
And then you like take the break, you got to go like grind the coffee and like prepare
it's a nice little, that's what I like about doing it that way, is like it's a little mental break, especially camp coffee. Like I made a pour over this morning, and so I use a little hand grinder. Like being camping, you're just kind of like taking in the view, sitting here grinding my coffee beans.
I can dig it. Yeah, it's a religious experience almost.
Pretty much,
if you're doing it the right way.
Yep.
Tim, are we going with Krueger or Krueger? What are we doing?
We'll go with Krueger.
Yeah. Tim Krueger, welcome to the podcast. Thanks. You for coming all the way to Texas to hand deliver my brand new Esker Hayduke tie.
Absolutely.
Do you do that for all your customers?
I do it for as many as I can possibly do it for.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah.
I mean, which is rare. Like,
so not that many.
That many. But if definitely if it works out, and actually, I hand delivered one other bike on this trip to an acquaintance in the valley in Buena Vista, Colorado. So
nice.
Yeah, because if I'm going that direction, it's more fun. It's fun to meet people.
The timing on this couldn't have worked out better. I know,
right?
I think I contacted you. We had the conversation about this bike like days before. It's like, if we can tell me exactly what you want and get the money over, I can probably swing it to bring it with me. But we didn't have a lot of wiggle room to make this happen, did we?
Not exactly, but that's, we everything being in Minneapolis, and in Minneapolis there's 3 of us that make up Esker, and so I'm in the warehouse with the guys all day long. And I think sometimes Kyle thinks I'm nuts, but this was one of those ones of like, Kyle, because we run about a 2 to 3 week lead time for all of our custom assemblies. It's like, Kyle, this one needs to be done today. Leaving, get it done. And he was able to whip it out. So
this is the reason why I have a podcast, so that there's just, I'm in it for the industry perks, you know. It's like you get your bike a couple weeks earlier.
Yeah, exactly, right?
That's nice.
Exactly.
And then you get the owner to hand deliver it to you, and then we get to sit down and chat. So it was pretty cool. Worth mentioning real quick, you and I just took a little ride we're out here at Lake Bryan, which my audience may know this is my stomping grounds. I've been coming out here since I was 19, 20 years old. So I've got about 25 years history out here at Lake Bryan. And that's where we're meeting up at. You delivered my bike, took it for a ride, and fell in love. Actually, before I ever rode it, I fell in love whenever I was looking at it on the internet. And even going further back, I've been following Esker since the Advocate days, whenever y'all had a Hayduke and that line, and have really been interested and fascinated and kind of a fan of your different business models and everything that you've done in the industry, the types of bikes that you're building. And so I'm really excited. This is a very exciting day for me. And worth noting just for the patrons is Tim and I just recorded a little "Come Ride with Me" episode that we're gonna release just for the patrons. So we mic'd up on our ride and had a chat and talked about some things that you're not gonna hear on this episode.
Yeah.
So a little Easter egg for the patrons if they want to go find that. So anyway, what are you doing, man? You just happen to be traveling through Texas.
Yeah. So we, well, I was out doing doing a bit of a tour for a couple weeks. We went first to go to Outer Bike in Moab, Utah. I think we talked in your Come Ride with Me episode about how we sell our bikes. We sell our bikes by having people ride them, right? Ride quality is one of our top paramount things that we sell our bikes on. And so we go to demos and find ways for people to demo our bikes. So yeah, I started this trip going to Outer Bike Moab, and then was on a bit of a tour. My wife and I both we travel around a lot. Behind us here is our camper that we probably spend a good 100 nights a year out of. So then I went over to Single Speed USA, and then she was working in San Antonio. So I came down to swing and pick her up, and we honestly have never really checked out Texas. So our goal was to, since she was in San Antonio and I had the camper, was to do a little bit of a tour through Texas and see what it's like.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, so far I got to drive all the way from where is that? The Dumas, kind of New Mexico Panhandle border way up there. I got to drive all the way across San Antonio.
Okay.
Then saw a friend in Austin, came up here, saw this, and now we're going to meander our way up towards Arkansas.
Oh, nice. I assume you've spent some time in Arkansas.
Spent a bit more time, mostly just in Bentonville. Bentonville is what we talk about in Minneapolis. Bentonville is the closest spot that you can kind of ride year round, right? It's a 10-hour drive from Minneapolis to Bentonville, and Bentonville's, warm enough that you can get down there and ride in the winter and stuff like that. So, Bentonville's really well known for the Minneapolis cycling community. Everyone kind of jets down. It's just like a super straight shot down the highway. So yeah, I've been there quite a bit.
How many hours?
10.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 8.5 from me. So
yeah. Okay.
It's a similar.
Yeah.
It's like you can. I think 4 days is good. 5 days is better. Mm-hmm. But you can drive there, spend a couple days riding, and drive back, and you feel like you got a good bang for your buck.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think so. Yeah. I've been, because of that. Bentonville's easy. Been there a whole bunch, but actually never really checked out other parts of Arkansas.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's really, I feel like Arkansas is kind of the blueprint from a state perspective and corporations also that are getting bought in of showing what's possible. That state is exploding with new residents and outdoor recreation tourism dollars.
Yep.
I think I don't know if there's other states doing it better. I'm sure there's other states doing a good job, but I feel like Arkansas is really kind of leading the way and really showcasing the value that outdoor recreation has for a state, for communities.
Yeah.
And it's really great to see. So I'm a big fan of what they're doing over there. Well, for anyone who doesn't know you, why don't you just introduce yourself? Who are you and what do you do?
Right on. Well, I am the owner and founder of Esker Cycles. And we are a bicycle company out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, that we sell essentially adventure bikes is kind of the way to sum it all up.
Yeah.
So got a long history of how I got here before that, but that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah. Well, that was one of my questions I had is how would you define the lineup of bikes that you sell through Esker? And in my mind, adventure bikes was the kind of demographic that you're trying to hit with that. And it seems like it's kind of been that way ever since the advocate days and continuing on till now.
Yeah, that's what's important to me. That's how I ride bikes. And so having your own bike company, one of the great things about it is you can simply make it reflective of what you want out of cycling, right? So yeah, we gravitate towards the adventure side of things. So kind of diving deeper, on our website, one of the things we explain as far as who we are is we have 3 tenets that make Esker bikes Esker, and it's geometry, ride quality, and durability, right? Those 3 things kind of all come together. Adventure bikes is then an easy way to sum that up because, durability, I think one of the things that I start out with all of our bikes is that they are going to be durable enough to get you into the woods and back out of the woods without any problems, right? And so our bikes are, sometimes people call that overbuilt. There's a bunch of ways to define that. Like when we do our destructive testing, we set our standards higher than what the industry standard is to make sure they're stronger. Our bikes are a little bit heavier than maybe a direct competitor, and I don't apologize for that. It's because they have a little bit more material where it counts, and they're designed to, maybe be a half pound heavier, but also survive a real long time. And then going into geometry, like when we were just riding, pretty much been known my whole career for really refined geometry.
Okay.
Like not talking about like any specific angles, but talking about a blend, right? Geometry you can't really decide on how a bike's going to ride by a specific angle. A lot of people like to in the bike industry concentrate on, oh, I want this reach, I want this head angle, or I want whatever. But really, unless all of the numbers are properly blended, the bike might ride weird. And that's what we're good at Esker, is really refining how everything comes together so that the bike just feels at home when you get on it. Right?
Yeah.
And then the third part of that, ride quality. If you're going to go on an adventure, you want a bike that's not going to beat you up. It's going to ride really good. And so ride quality comes more into how we design tube sets. We can go real deep on this. This is one of my geek spots. But for our steel bikes, we make all of our own tube sets. There's like a whole ton of words, like, because we use a whole bunch of different engineering methods to get what we want. But I think I'm trying to even come up with them off the top of my head right now. Our steel tube sets are seamless, drawn over mandrel, quad butted, tapered, and heat treated 4130 chromoly. Right.
Wow.
And like all that
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right?
Say no more.
Right. But each one of those things is an important, like, it's funny because it's a mouthful of stuff that doesn't really mean a whole lot to folks. Might seem like marketing jargon, but for me, each one of those things is like a process that we do to really refine the ride quality and like make the bike both strong enough, but also not riding like a brick, riding like a really lively ride. And then in a titanium, we use drawn over mandrel double butted titanium, which is also pretty rare. Like titanium's a really hard material to draw a double butted tube. And so a good chunk of titanium on the market, straight gauge. Double butting doesn't like, if you built a double butted bike with like a 1 millimeter end of the tube, you had a straight gauge bike that means the tube's the same thickness all the way through.
Okay.
That was 1 millimeter thick. They're probably about the same strength, right? But there's a very different ride quality, right?
Okay.
When you butt a tube, you can tune where you put the butts, how thick they are, all of this stuff. You can tune how the bike flexes so you can do flexes that you want and also tune out flexes that you don't want.
Yeah.
And that's a really big thing we go into in our bikes, so that between that and the geometry stuff I talked about, our bikes are known for just like being like that comfy t-shirt. You get on it, and you're just like, this is my home. I love this thing. I'm going to ride it forever.
That is such a good analogy. And that surmises exactly my experience. You can listen to the Come Ride With Me episode where I'll dive deeper into some of my thoughts. But essentially, from the second I got in it, I'm like, oh, this is my bike. I'm comfortable. I'm happy. This feels great. It's smooth. The geometry is a perfect blend.
Yep.
For what this bike wants to do, which is a bikepacking. It's designed for bikepacking.
Exactly.
So you're going to hit some probably lighter single track, not the gnarliest single track. You might be going straight on gravel roads for a long period of time. And so my initial impression is that you hit that mark perfectly.
Thanks.
Freaking bullseye.
Nice. That's always our goal, is to blend all that together as seamlessly as possible to give an overall good bicycle, right?
So you went into some of like the technical aspects that honestly they fly over my head. Very interesting to some people, I'm sure, but I'm curious, like, what percentage of the market or your customer base is really tuned in to the very nitty gritty of the 1 millimeter tubing and the butting and the geometry versus the customers that are more like me that just want to get on the bike and be like, oh, this feels right,
Right. Well, I think that's definitely more of the customers are just going by feel. And I would say that's the majority of the cycling public. When we get into the real geek end of things, definitely there's people that's what they find attractive in the bike industry, and they want to go in all the depth of all of that. But I'd say that's not the majority of people.
Okay.
And on top of that, like some of that stuff I rattled off, like then when we go real deep into the geekery of what each of those things is, that's our secret sauce. So I'm not gonna tell anybody exactly what all of our tube thicknesses are and what those budding profiles are doing, because that would be giving away a bunch of work that I've done, and that makes us special and what gives us the good ride quality. But we definitely get customers that are, we get customers that'll ask like, okay, so you have quad butted top tube. What are the 4 different thicknesses of that quad butting, and what are your butt lengths? And I'm like, no, you're engineers. You're an engineer. I appreciate that. I love it, but you're not getting that info. and on top of that, a lot of it is because we are doing the engineering. We actually don't want people making the decision based on having that knowledge, because once they get into a level of that geekery, they might go, oh, well, I want it to be 0.1 thicker in this area. It's like, well, we did the engineering, we did the testing, we balanced it out, and 0.1 thicker over there would transfer the stress to a different point, and then this other thing would have to change as well. Like, we've blended everything together properly already. Like, it's really hard to pick out, like also in geometry we're talking about, you can't just pick out one variable and say, I want that changed. Because it's not as simple as saying like, oh, I love your bike, but I want the head tube angle 1 degree slacker, because that completely throws up the entire system. Like for me, if you say, I want this bike exactly how you guys make it, but I want a 1 degree slacker, I'm like, well, that ruins it. And for me, I'd be changing 3 other variables to blend it back together, right? And so we tend not to go too deep in our marketing, giving a lot of that information away. A lot of what we like to talk about with people is come ride our bike, right? Meet us at an event, find a place where our demo fleet's going to be at one of our dealers. Please come ride the bike. Yeah. And then just go ride it and see how it feels, right? Buy a bike on ride feel, because we're confident that all that does come together to a really good ride feel. And I just, we put a lot of work into that, and I don't want to give it away.
Man, I don't even want to know the secret sauce. I just, I want to show up and ride the bike. I want everything to work, right?
Yeah.
Like that's it. I want it to feel right. I want it to fit, and I want it to work and be functional and durable, so that I am not fucking with my bike when I'm out on a bike ride. That's not what I want to be doing. I want to be enjoying the bike, and I don't need to know all the ins and outs. I just want to know that I get on it, it rides. I want to know that there's a guy like you and your team behind the bike that went through all the minutia, that went through all the stress testing, that went through all the, if I do this, then it does that. So we got to do this, and then we do that. Like, you do that, I'll give you my money so that I can just go ride the bike and have a good time.
That's a lot of what we talk about, because that's exactly, like, we've done all that work. That's why we're here, right? Like, obviously we're a business. We're making a product. We're selling it for more than it costs us to make it, so that we can pay our employees, we can all live our lives, and we can make a little bit of profit, right? And that's what that is the work that's going into that. A lot of the customers we get that want to go into the minutia, we'll actually refer them away from us to a custom builder. It's like, oh, cool. It sounds like what you want. Let's connect you with a custom builder. And it's not that we don't want to deal with that customer. It's that if that's exactly what they want, there's a whole other part of the industry catering to that, right? What we do is we make solid products that people can climb on. They don't have to think about that stuff. They can trust that we did all the engineering, we did all the testing, we put our name on it, so it's good to go ride. And it's not that we don't want to deal with like folks that really want to geek out, because I love them to death. I'll talk about it all day long with them. But then, most of the time we'll say, hey, it'd be, why don't you go buy a bike from X? Because they'll build you what you're asking for. Yeah.
And you're in the business of making people happy on their bikes, whether it's yours or somebody else's. Like
precisely.
We're all better when there's more of us out there having a good time on our bikes.
Yep.
So there's not a lot of value. And I mean, maybe from a bottom line business perspective, but long-term business strategy, it's better to just lead your customers in the best into the best direction, whatever that may be.
Yep.
So Tim, I feel like you're a bit of an enigma, and I don't know if that's by design or not, but researching for this episode, it's kind of hard. Like, you don't have a huge, not talking about your Esker Cycling, but your own personal social media.
Yeah.
Not huge presence there.
Yeah.
I went Googling and Googling and Googling. I didn't find any other podcasts that you've been on, and maybe you have. A lot of the articles that I found where you had been interviewed and stuff were back from like 2015 and the advocate days.
Sure.
Is that by design? Do you intentionally just stay behind the scenes and do your work? And is that just like where you feel the most comfortable?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I'm not trying to like throw myself out there in any big way with this. Like, I really just like, I like making bikes, like being part of the bike industry. I would definitely say, over time, promoting Esker has definitely been one of our weaker spots, because that's not me. I'm not one who's going out and, doing every single thing to get attention or talking a lot about our stuff. So, like social media, especially, like I've said many times, if it weren't for having to run a company, I probably would have deleted Facebook and Instagram by now, right?
I'm saying, yeah, I'm saying.
But that's a fact of marketing products in today's world. So I have Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I'm not necessarily like trying to be super private. I'm just not, my personality is not one to go, hey, look at me.
Hey, look at me.
Right. But
me neither, but no one would believe it.
Right.
I hide it really well, but yeah, my comfort zone is not out in the public eye or whatever. And whenever I started this podcast, I didn't tell nobody that I knew about it. I was like, I just want to do this thing over here. And if it goes okay, then I'll tell people. But if it crashes and burns, and nobody has to know. And I prefer that. Well, I appreciate you chatting with me.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to get your story.
Yeah.
We're going to get it for the rec. We're going to get an updated 2024 version of what's going on with Tim. I want to start with your first job at, I think it was Stadium Bike in
Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Stadium Bike in Green Bay, Wisconsin. So how old were you, and what did you do there?
Gosh, that had to be about 1996. I was 15. Definitely I liked mountain bikes, had, found it as a young teenager and was like that. And I believe I bought my first mountain bike before I worked there. My first real mountain bike. So I had like some, department store cheap Huffies earlier on, trying to make those work. And it must have been about 95. I bought a Schwinn Moab 2, right? And was like, oh yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to work in the bike shop. So yeah, got my first job doing that. I think at 15, I was probably like flattening the cardboard boxes and putting them in the dumpster, and I think they maybe let me start touching bikes, after a few months or something like that.
Well, in 10 years, I want you to know your story hasn't changed, because there was a Bike Rumor article interview with you from 2015.
Nice.
And you gave that same answer.
Oh, perfect.
So your answer, you're consistent, man.
Good. But then I think, I was able to go pretty fast once I was able to start working. Any business is going to protect. They're not going to let some 15-year-old kid just start turning wrenches on a bike. But I actually got my start as a mechanic way before that. My dad is an auto mechanics instructor, and we had a garage in our backyard, and he would buy crashed snowmobiles from insurance companies.
Okay.
Wrapped around a tree, sunk in a lake, all this stuff. And so it had to be about 9 to 10 years old. I started working with him out there working on snowmobiles, because I know by the time I was 12 in Wisconsin, you can get your snowmobile license at 12 years old.
Okay.
And by the time I was 12 and got my snowmobile license, I had already built my own snowmobile as well. And so learned how to be a mechanic on motorized things, and was already pretty good at that.
Wrenching is wrenching.
So wrenching is wrenching. Bikes have some peculiarities, but wrenching is wrenching. And so then, once I was able to start touching bikes in the bike shop, went pretty fast to being allowed to do everything in the bike shop.
We have an interesting connection that I just have to mention. My first business that I ever started was a company that bought salvaged motorcycles from the insurance auctions.
Yep.
But my business model was, I had a website. So these are dealer only auctions that you go to. I had my dealership's license. I was also partners in an e-commerce website business at that time, or just a website design business. This was 2000. So is when, phone books were kind of transitioning out, and I was going to businesses and being like, hey, do you want to be on the internet and have a website? So I was doing that. So built a website. So we would take all of the listings from Copart, is the company that I use. I'm sure you know Copart.
I have bought a vehicle from Copart in the past. Yep.
So I use them, and then all I would do is I would take their listings, put them on my website, allow the general public to bid on them, and then whatever the winning bid was, I would take that bid to auction by proxy. And if they won, I would take like a 10% finder fee. So I was shipping bikes all over the world.
Yeah.
And then I got into buying some myself and fixing them and turning around and selling them. And so that was one of my businesses too. Not so much on the mechanic side, more on like the business side, but I was in the same game for a little while.
Yeah.
So what kind of riding do you like to do? And I think this is a question that I think it changes for everybody. Like right now I'm in the season of life where I'm wanting to do this. So at this season in life, like what kinds of rides are you really gravitating towards?
Well, I definitely define myself as a mountain biker. Yeah. Right. So I would say single track mountain biking in the 2 to 4 hour range is pretty much what I do. And then followed really closely behind with bikepacking. That's probably the two of those things are probably what I spend 80% of my time doing. And then a little bit on the end, gravel and single speed hardtail stuff. So like when we were just out riding, I was riding my Rowell, which is our 140, 150 travel 29er full suspension bike. That's pretty much that's my daily driver.
Okay.
So yeah, if I can get out for that in the Midwest, my parents they live up in northern Wisconsin, in the Chequamegon area. Yeah. So go to that all the time. 200 miles of single track in the woods there. Definitely go out on big rides there on my suspension bike all the time. Was also up there just recently. Took the LVS out for an overnighter from their place. They're actually 4 miles, I think, from the Rock Lake Trail, which is a IMBA epic, worldwide known, awesome trail. So just ride from their place, ride out there. There's a lakeway out there. Nice little 14-mile, I think, one-way ride from their place out to an overnighter, ride back. Yeah. That's the way I definitely spend most of my time. And then, like I said, a little bit of single speed, a little bit of gravel. I did spend 7 years as a bicycle tour guide. From, what was that? 1999 to 2006 in the summers. So I definitely like getting the long drop bar miles in that way, but just don't find the time for real long rides anymore like that. So, up to 50 mile-ish gravel rides once in a while.
That's the hard thing, is finding the time, man. That is the key factor right there. And when you're owning a business.
Oh, yeah.
So you own a business, you're married, you have familial obligations. I've got a couple kids. Yep. And trying to run a business, and it's it's hard to find the time, but when you find the time, it even makes it that much more special, to be able to get away. I mentioned where you got that 5-day bike. It's probably more of a bike tour, a dirt tour of Oaxaca, because we're going to be trying to stay in like a hostel or some kind of thing every time. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One, don't want to go to Oaxaca and not enjoy the culture. Right. So like Cass Gilbert has all these campsites that are like right outside of the city, which is great. Cool. Do that. But I want to go into the tienda. I want to, eat some pupusas, some tolludas, and some margaritas probably, and like just enjoy like the culture. Like that's a big part of like why we want to go. And then I'm trying to film it, so then at night I can like transfer all my files and recharge stuff. And that's the approach we're taking. So we're gonna dirt tour it, but I haven't been on like a 5-day trip. I think it was like 2019 was the last time I got in a full solid 5-day. I might be forgetting some. Oh, I just rode across Arkansas for 6 days. That counts. See, I forget shit. They're in there somewhere.
Well, same thing. I mean, that's what I used to love doing. But trying to find the time to be away from the business is really hard and things like that. Like we actually just sent 2 of our guys and 4 of our dealers and a photographer on the Durango to Moab San Juan Hut trip.
Yeah. That's one I'd love to do.
They just did that, and I was partly that might be that thing has like 4,000 feet of climbing on some days.
Wow.
I was like, so partly that might have been above my physical ability, but also I was like, yeah, just even finding that much time to be away is hard.
Yeah.
So I had to sit there and go, oh, I wish I was there, but they had a good time.
I've been invited on that trip with a couple different groups on 2 different occasions, and I haven't been able to go. But that one's on the bucket list for sure. I like the concept of the hut to hut.
Yeah,
for sure. Schwamigan.
Yeah.
So when I was researching, I learned that you were the race director, the creator of the Schwamigan, which it's now the Schwamigan 100. I don't know if it's always been the Schwamigan 100.
Well, there's 2 distinct races there. So the Schwamigan Fat Tire Festival, or the Schwamigan 40, which is what's really well known. It was started in 1983 by Gary Crandall, largest mass start race in the country. That is entirely separate from what we did. And we had the Schwamigan 100.
Okay.
So different, and some people confuse them a little bit, which is okay. Because the reason for the Schwamigan 100 was because of the Schwamigan 40. So the Schwamigan 40, like I said, legendary event, started in one of the earliest mountain bike races ever in the country, largest mass start mountain bike race in the country for a long time, all this stuff, and brought 2,500 racers a year.
Wow.
To our little tiny corner. Up there, it's you're racing from a town of 3,000 to a town of 250, right? Like it's pretty cool, right? So lots of people come up, got to see all that. When I was living up there, there was a lot of people coming up for that. There was a lot of single track building. The Schwamigan Area Mountain Bike Association, been around for a really long time, organization that builds trails there. At that time, 25 years ago, there was already 100 miles of single track in that area. Now there's well over 200. I think it's almost up to 300 now. So all these people are coming up racing the Schwamigan 40, which by today's standards amounts to a gravel race. At that time, definitely a mountain bike race, but it leads out on a few miles of pavement into 10 miles of ski trail on the American Birkebeiner Trail, also largest ski race in North America, in the area, and then gets on some 2-track and some gravel roads and so on and so forth, back on some ski trail. Basically doesn't hit any single track, right? And it's because it has so many people, like it is what it is. So I wanted to put together something that brought people up to that area and showed them the single track that was there. So we started the Schwamigan 100, because at that time I was racing 100 milers and 24-hour solo events and having a good time doing that. We started the Schwamigan 100 to bring people up there, show them all the 100 miles of single track, because also in that area, such an extensive network, we could run 100 miles, of which it was 80, I think it was about 84 miles of that 100 miles were fully on single track, and we never used the same trail twice.
Oh, wow.
Right? It was super cool.
So every year a new course?
Oh, no, not every year. Just like in the 100 mile, they never looped over the same piece of trail twice.
Gotcha.
It was a big circuitous loop through all that. So it was pretty cool. And we did actually over the years, we did change the course many, many times.
So how many years did you run that?
Let's see. We would have started it in 2012. And then I believe I gave it away 3 years. Where were we? 2024. So I probably ran it for 9 or 10 years. And then that particular event definitely got too busy with Esker and all of that. So we and while we run I guess I should go back. I think the first 2 years we ran that event was free. We just wanted people to come do 100 miles, come on up and ride. And we had a little bit of a problem with attrition. We were to manage a free event, we capped it at, I don't know, 150 or 200 people.
That's a big group still.
And we get a whole bunch of people that would sign up, and then like half the people wouldn't show up because it was free.
Right.
So they had no skin in the game.
Exactly.
Right? So talking to a few folks, I can't remember who it was, somebody gave me advice of like, you got to have skin in the game.
Yep.
Charge them.
Yep.
So we started charging them. And then we had some money that we didn't want the money. It wasn't the point, right? So we donated that money to that Schwamigan Area Mountain Bike Association, to the trail org, maintaining all those trails. And then over the years, that's what we did, right? So we just kept whatever money was profit from the event went to the trail org. And then so when we finally were done running the event, now we've donated the entire event to the Chequamegon Area Mountain Bike Association. They run it themselves as their own event now, and I think they've run it 3 years now. So I think that timeline checks out.
So help me understand, where does Lifetime come into this? Because when I was Googling it, it was a Lifetime Chequamegon 100.
Nope. So Lifetime owns the Chequamegon 40.
Oh,
so that's where the two get confused a lot. So the Chequamegon Fat,
okay,
the
yeah,
Chequamegon
I have dyslexia, so numbers jump around for
it's
me.
It's all good. So yeah, so like I said, Gary Crandall, also known as the Fat Man to anyone that's ever done the Chequamegon 40, super awesome dude. Started it in '83, wrote it. I don't know exact dates here, but I want to say he ran it up until maybe somewhere around the 2015, 2016, somewhere in there. And then he sold the Chequamegon 40 or the Chequamegon Fat Tire Festival to Lifetime Fitness.
Okay.
So they've been running it since then for that. And then they've expanded it and changed it quite a bit. So I believe I was up there this year. In fact, that's what we did for our bike packing this year. My friend and I that I go bike packing with, we basically rode out on course, watched them all, and then went out and overnighted.
Oh yeah, that's fun.
And so I believe there's like 2,700 people now. They've expanded it a bit, so it's a little bit bigger. And you know, when you have a large corporation like Lifetime and the might they can bring in, like it's a full on party now, right?
Oh,
like it always was. Like Gary put on he put on like a true festival. Like there was always the Sunday after, there was a bike toss and a log pull and an orienteering event and just cool stuff. And then Lifetime's got it now where like at the finish, it was like a little mini industry expo.
Yeah.
Like everybody regional to the Midwest, Park Tool, One Up bike racks, but like tons of brands I can't remember. There was like 40 booths set up at the finish. So it's a pretty big event they put on now, yeah.
So what is today? Today's Friday, right?
Yeah.
So I'm 6 days away from running the Central Texas Showdown. We got about 160 people showing up this year. And I get so nervous, like leading. I'm a mess. Like my cognitive ability is not good.
Yeah.
I'm not sleeping well. I'm just anxious from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. And I don't even know exactly what I'm freaking out about. Like I've run quite a few of these events but I always feel this pressure. Did you get stressed out, or am I just a stressy person?
No, all the time. Like, so for me, it was always because I do mental checklists. I'm not good at like writing things down.
My man.
Everything's in my head,
yeah,
right?
I mean,
And
I try to write shit down.
Right?
I try.
And so I would always like, I wasn't usually stressed out about getting the things I knew that had to get done, right? I was like, oh yeah, I got this. I'm doing this day, this day. I wasn't terribly stressed out. For me, the anxiety was always like, oh my God, what thing am I going to get to Saturday morning and go, I forgot to do that thing.
Right.
And it's going to be, and I always had the anxiety of like, is there something that's that big enough that would like, you know, I had 250 people coming to the Chequamegon 100. And we had, I think almost 300 for our Hungry Bear 100, our gravel event. I was always just racking my brain about what is that thing that I might forget to do, that they all show up and like the event is ruined and they can't ride. And I have 300 angry people looking at me.
Oh,
right.
God.
And so that was the only anxiety I had. But like usually, you know, the whole thing of like all the small stuff, setting course, bringing the materials, getting everything done. Yeah, I just kind of did it and didn't worry too much, but there's always that looming in the back of your head until everyone starts, then you have your first sigh relief. Whew.
Right.
And then once everyone is in at the end, then you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, mental release.
Yeah.
That thing's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting because I mean, it's just me. Like if something is wrong, it's 100% my fault. There's nobody else I can point to. And
right.
I think I'm ready. Like like I said, I don't even know what I'm worried about. Like I think we're good and I've done it quite a few times and it always goes great. Never had any issues, but I am just a ball of nerves, man.
Oh yeah. But I mean, like some of them were real examples. Like I want to think like one year I forgot to order the course arrows.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I think it was like, I always had like a party of volunteers, 10 or so folks that would come out and help me the day before, give them each pile of arrows and tape, send them out on certain sections of the course to help me mark the course, because marking 100 miles of single track is
Takes
big
a minute.
endeavor.
Yeah.
And there was one year that I want to say it was like 10 p.m. the night before. I was like, I have no arrows for these people coming to help me tomorrow morning.
Just get your volunteers.
It was like,
they stand in one position. You're like, go right. Then you have 2 lefts and then a right.
right. And I want to think like, if I remember right, like I was sitting there on like my mom's printer that night, just printing off arrows or something. Yeah.
Dude, I almost didn't have insurance. I just got insurance locked in yesterday, like 7 days before the event.
Yep.
I just kept putting I thought it was going to be easier than it was. And it turned out to be not as easy as I was expecting.
Yeah.
And there was a 24-hour period. It's like, oh fuck, am I gonna? Will I have insurance on this?
Yeah.
Which the venues that I'm at require me to have. So how are they gonna feel about I don't know. It's like shit like that.
Yeah, we had that once. We actually did it. We did a couple other events over time too. Duluth, Minnesota, has a big endeavor they did. I want to say about 15 years ago, where they built the Duluth Traverse. So 100 miles of single track across the city of Duluth from one end to the other. And once that was done, we ran an event, I think for probably just 2 years, the Get You Groomy Traverse. We ran a mountain bike race on a chunk of that trail. And I remember that one, same thing, it was insurance, right? Because it was the city of Duluth. I was used to running my events kind of in the national forest in northern Wisconsin, where, you need insurance. You need to show the landowners and all that, but it was easier. And I remember it was like the city of Duluth on that one, they needed like the proof of insurance 60 days out. And like they said, okay, today's your deadline. Where's your proof of insurance? And I was like, I don't have it yet.
I missed the memo.
And, I already had people signed up for the event and everything. And thank God for lenient people. Because I was like, it was one of those of like, oh gosh, this thing's done. But
dude, my East Texas showdown, we just had some really significant rain a few months ago, and they shut down some of the roads in the Sam Houston National Forest and the Davy Crockett National Forest. And I remember hearing about that like months ago, but I kind of forgot about it. And then I was out there, like I was scouting a new portion of the route. I was checking something out, and I came across this like closed road with an official notice from the National Forest Service. And I was like, oh, fuck. And I found out literally the day before registration opened. And I was like, I think I just go ahead with registration and like cross my fingers. And then I got with the Forest Service and everything is going to be fine. But it was a whole process. We had to go through the entire route, every single road, see what was open, see what would be open by the time the race is going to happen in 6 months from now. But yeah, I was like, oh, I'm going to be refunding a bunch of people.
Yeah, but we had that with the gravel race one year. There was some heavy washouts, same thing. It was actually the fall before, but up in northern Wisconsin, all these roads close over the winter for snow, right? And we ran this gravel race in the early spring, and I was out there pre-running the gravel course in my wife's Jeep, and a whole culvert. There's this one, what was it called? Fox Den Road or something. Rarely used road out in the middle of nowhere. And a culvert had washed out. And I was coming around a corner, when I pre-ran the courses, I'd drive 30 or 40 miles an hour out in these gravel roads and just basically piled into a missing culvert in her Jeep, just destroyed the front axle of this truck, right? And I was like, okay, I should do the right thing here and call the sheriff. And I called the sheriff and told him the culvert was missing from the road and we were having a gravel race the next day and all this. And their reaction was, all right, road's closed. They came out and just closed the road. And I was sitting there going, well, the only way to get from this part of the gravel course to the other part of the gravel course is this road. What do I do? And yeah, we ended up just like crossing our fingers and running a gravel race on a closed road.
I definitely thought of it. Right? The thing about, you were dealing with the county. Yeah. I'm dealing with the National Forest Service, and that's a different beast. Like, I can't piss those people off. So I really wouldn't run it on a closed road, but I thought about it for a second. But then immediately after, I was like, no, I can't, because if I get caught, this event goes away forever.
And that's it. Like, I think that is a difference, because we ran Check 100 on National Forest land too. And messing with a county versus messing with the feds has different end outcomes.
I'm not playing that game. I'm not playing that. And we, like I said, we only have 3% public land in Texas.
Yeah,
so
right. Yeah.
this is very rare. I can't just hop over to this other section over here and do a different iteration of it. Like, I need those people to like me.
Yep.
And right now they do. Right now we have a very good relationship. And,
exactly.
I want to keep that going.
Yeah.
Let's move, and then we'll set up. You're in a nice spot. All right. Well, we absolutely have to get into salsa.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's some cool shit.
That's where I got my start. That's where I got my start on the industry side of things.
Yep. Yeah. So tell me the story. Like, how did you get started with salsa, and what was your role there?
Sure. Well, I think within the bike industry, like I said, I did bike shops the whole time. So then I was managing a shop in northern Wisconsin in the Canba area for a while, and we were a really good salsa dealer, and so ended up getting to know a lot of the people at Salsa, because also Salsa QBP Minneapolis based. It's only 3 hours away.
There you go.
They would come, pretty much all of QBP when they want good single track at that time would come up to where we were. Now there's ride centers all over northern Minnesota, Cuyuna and other things. But at that time, Shawamigan was the ride center. So they'd all come up. So I got to know all these folks. They posted a job for a product manager, and I somehow got it. So that was like my first thing. At that time, Salsa was being run by a guy named Jason Boucher, who hired me in. Super awesome dude who still plays around in the bike industry. He's actually, I don't know if he wants me telling what he does, so I won't say that.
Fair enough.
But he still plays around helping small bike companies behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And coached me on a whole ton of things he knows, and still a guy I hang out with, once a month or so and talk to, and we trade all sorts of industry stuff. So
behind the iron curtain,
right,
where the real deals get done, or the real insider meeting of minds.
Exactly. But so Jason was the thought process behind the Gen 1 Fargo.
All right.
And the El Mariachi, and what else was? Casserole was at that time.
Okay.
So that was like when I stepped into Salsa. That was the pile of the pile of bikes I had to manage at that point was those plus the Dos Niner. Remember that bike?
I do.
And the Mamacita.
Yep.
And those.
So what year did you start with Salsa?
2008.
Okay. Yep. I was going to guess 2009. I was close.
Yeah, 2008. And but at that time, they had that wide range of product that some of it made sense together, some of it didn't. The tagline of Salsa at that time was "Ride and Smile."
I don't even remember that.
Right, and Ride and Smile came from Ross Schaefer. So basically, at that time, all of the branding that was still Salsa was still being carried over from when QBP purchased it from Ross Schaefer in 1999. So Pepperman, Ride and Smile, all of this old stuff, which is cool nostalgia in the bike industry for sure. But then we kind of looked at, how to make this product line cohesive, how to make things known, like what the brand was about and things like that. We did a lot of kind of introspection exercises, and kind of what I was talking about before is like reflections of like what we want the bike brand to be based on how we ride, right? Like Jason, coming up with like the Gen 1 Fargo was Jason's riding style, right? That was his thing. Still is more or less his thing today, right? And so that was the dawn. That was well before the idea of gravel bikes existed, well before bikepacking as a term existed, right? And things like that. And so, but we had this thing, and so that's where Adventure by Bike came from. Is Jason, myself, Kid Reamer, who's still at Salsa today.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm trying to think of who was there with us. David Gabriz, who is the founder of 45 North, still runs 45 North in Terravale. Yep. So the four of us kind of did this big deep dive for months about what we wanted the brand to be, how we like to ride bikes, what we think the future of riding bikes looks like for us and for Salsa. And that's where the Adventure by Bike tagline came up with, and the full rebranding and essentially the creation of what the modern brand of salsa was. And experienced, I'll say, meteoric growth. Like, I probably can't share numbers on here because they're private QBP numbers. But I know we 10x'd that company or more in like 5 years with the adventure by bike stuff.
Yeah.
So
I want to dig more into that, but product manager, is that what your role was? What is a product manager? What were you kind of overseeing?
So there's a bit of a misnomer for a term, because product manager in most industries is somebody who kind of manages the product's approach to the market. It's usually a marketing function. It's within a marketing department. So product manager in IT is like, I'm going to make sure this thing we're making fits the customer's needs and things like that. Product manager in the bike industry is more typically around the idea of product development manager. So my day-to-day was managing the engineering team that supported salsa, because within the building of QBP at that time, there were like pockets, right? So there was an engineering department that was like billed to us as we used them, right?
Okay.
So they weren't necessarily our team, but they were. And so they had their own boss as an engineer, but I managed kind of how they did the salsa stuff. It was weird, right? And it changed many times over the years I was there. But at that time, that's what it was. So yeah, I would basically manage the start to finish of the develop. So we'd come up with a concept for a bike, between developing what the bike was, talking about like what its geometry was, what its needs are, what its wants are, getting the engineering team to do those things. I traveled to Asia all the time, and that's actually part of the story of where Esker comes from later on. So I went to Asia 4 or 5 times a year for them, working with all of the partners overseas, the factories, the assemblers, everything else that was done over there to basically deliver a sellable product to the QBP warehouses.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, so you had your fingers in the pie.
Yeah, and definitely I would say, like, the bike industry has a lot of fun jobs. That was an extremely fun job. I mean, having the power of QBP, they're an enormous company, well respected around the world for like being well run and paying their bills on time. So like basically you'd never get a no at any factory. If you went in saying, "Hi, I'm QBP," they're like, "Cool, what do you want? We'll do it." Right? It like having that power as a product developer was just like, yeah, it's where kind of the creativity that Salsa, Surly, and then some of their other brands are known for came from. Is like we just had this these amazing teams coming up with these cool ideas, and then this amazing horsepower behind us to do it.
Yeah, so let's dig into that. I have a 2011 Salsa Fargo. It was my first bike that I got specifically with bikepacking in mind. And, you know, at that time, Salsa, I mean, they're still cool, but I mean, they really set themselves apart by being, I want you to help me fill in the blanks because I'm just a consumer looking on the outside, but I mean, the Salsa Fargo was a revolutionary bike at that time. And then this whole product line and this ethos of adventure by bike, I mean, can we credit Salsa and you were there during that time for this emergence of this whole other genre of bike riding, bike styles, bike geometry, what bikes can do, what they're for, all this stuff?
Yeah, I think you can definitely credit Salsa in that, because that was internal discussions we had. Is we knew we were the first to be doing a lot of these things, but we also knew that we weren't going to be the last, that we were creating something and a lot of people would be joining us.
Yeah.
I would say being a part of those internal discussions 15 years ago, I don't even think our wildest dreams would have said it's as big as it is today.
Right.
Like they definitely kicked off something big, right? Like if you look at, cause that's Salsa with the Warbird. The aluminum Warbird was a bike I worked on. That was the first gravel specific bike ever made.
Oh,
right. Like the Fargo was intended for mountain touring, for that. Looking at how people were riding gravel, basically at that time in Minnesota, gravel was blowing up in Minnesota because we have tons of gravel roads, right? And this would have had to be about 2010. people riding cross bikes, all this stuff. So we kind of looked at what is for this riding style, what's appropriate. And what was appropriate was a low bottom bracket and a long wheelbase, right? Cross bikes are all high bottom bracket, right? So we basically took, now I'm drawing a blank on names. Not Las Cruces was a steel cross bike Salsa had. La Razza was a steel one. I can't remember the name offhand, but we had a black and blue, I remember it, cross bike, made out of aluminum and everything. And we basically just took that engineering, those tube profiles, those everything, but just made new geometry, right? And that was the very first Warbird. It was the very first, what I would say, gravel specific frame set ever made with a low bottom bracket, a long wheelbase, made for, more tire clearance, made for going out on gravel roads. And at that time, I remember trying to get that thing through, because, it's a big corporation. Everything had checks and balances. When I came up with crazy ideas, I still had to deal with accountants and lawyers and everything else to get product through. And I remember that being like, really? We're going to sell that? All right. Maybe people will want something like that. And, now that's the biggest segment of the bike industry.
Right.
Entirely, right? Or I'd say the non-powered. I'd say e-bikes is probably the biggest segment of the bike industry on its own right now. But the biggest pedal bike segment. So they did that. And then same with bikepacking. Like, Jason definitely showed me bikepacking. We were bikepacking back when Revel 8 was called Epic Designs. And to get a bikepacking frame bag, you called up Epic Eric himself and he sewed it in your basement. And he was the only dude. He was one dude running Epic Designs at that time and the only dude making frame bags in the entire country.
Wow.
And I think my first bikepacking trip was a 6-day. I strung together the Cocopelli Trail and the White Rim into one
beautiful.
big 300-mile loop over about 6 days. And I remember, calling Epic Eric and getting a frame bag made for that bike.
That's as OG as you can get.
Pretty much, right? Yeah. Now seeing how that segment is today is amazing.
It's crazy. Yeah. And it all started at this time during which you were at Salsa helping to create these ideas and these bikes. And I'm curious, like, what was the thought process? Like, how were you approaching these ideas? Were you just saying, hey, this is the bike that I want? Or are you looking at the market and being like, they're using that bike to do that, I think we could do it better? Like, what was the thought process for, like, what led to y'all coming up with these ideas that were complete outliers that have now created entirely new genres and sectors of cycling?
I think that was a big shift over in that it was a little bit of analyzing how we were using bikes and wanting to use bikes and also how other people were, because there was a big shift over in the industry at that point of like, the 10 years prior to that point, mountain biking was cross-country racing or downhill racing, right? That was it. And racing was a big focus of pretty much all aspects of the bike industry. Right. And there was we saw people start to go like, I don't just want to go racing all the time, or I want to do other racing. Like the new series popped up at that time too. So Salsa suspension bikes were definitely geared at that time towards 100-milers towards 24-hour events. That's what I was doing at that time. I was like 24 solos. I was actually moderately good at that. I'm slow, but I can ride slow for a long time. Could at that time.
That's me. My saying is I'm pro slow.
Right.
I can go for a long ways, but I'm not going to do it very quickly.
Right. Exactly. And so, that's where so we saw kind of this adventure potential and people wanting that, but mostly saw it from within. This is how we want to use bikes. And we were kind of being given freedom to build this brand of how we wanted to play with bikes. So we did.
Yeah. Were you involved at all with the Cutthroat?
Yes. The Cutthroat was right as I left Salsa. So, that one was called Carbon Fargo in project name.
Yeah.
Because that was also when the bike industry was moving to basically everything had to be carbon if you wanted to sell it. Right. And so the Carbon Fargo project started. If I remember right, that bike, we did all the geometry. That bike was like drawn in 3D in the computer. And I think I did like one of the first visits to the factory that built it. But then I never actually got to put my hands on a solid object before I left. So then it came out.
I mean, yeah, the Fargo, I feel like was a big shift in the bike industry.
Yeah.
And obviously the Cutthroat is kind of on its coattails, but it does seem to stand alone as just a widely regarded, exceptional bike, especially for that type of riding. I mean, it was designed around the Tour Divide. So I think, Tour Divide style riding. There's not many people that are going to hop on that bike and have a bad experience. Like, it's widely accepted. That is a fantastic bike.
Yep. And you nailed it. Like Tour Divide, internally, a lot of the discussion on a lot of the bikes being made at that time was Tour Divide, because I was up and coming really fast. At that time, Salsa was sponsoring Jay Peterberry. That's where I got to know Jay really well in the early years. Behind the scenes, Jay was actually helping us quite a bit and a lot of feedback on product development.
Right.
And I got to do several trips out to the Tetons to just hang out with Jay, get his feedback on whatever thing we were doing at that time.
Jay's got ideas.
He's got ideas. And he rides bikes a lot.
He rides bikes and he's got ideas. And he has good ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so if I recall, I don't remember all the exact details, but like a lot of that bike's impetus was like building a Tour Divide racing bike.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, you could talk about Salsa for the next 5 years.
Right.
But you've had how long have you been in the cycling industry?
Since that first bike shop job at Stadium Bike in 1996. So I guess 28 years.
28 years. Yeah. So we're coming up on 3 decades.
Yeah.
So going to try to cover as much as we can. So let's skip ahead to Advocate Cycles. So you left, take me through, you left Salsa, and did you leave to start Advocate? What happened there?
The bike industry is an interesting place. We'll say with QBP, my time was up there.
Yeah.
That happens a lot, at bigger corporations for folks, right? So after that, I was actually kind of going to go, you know what? I think I'm going to be done with bikes for a while. Like I said, I have a skill set as a bicycle touring guide. We actually considered starting our own business in more of the recreation and tourism industry.
Okay. Yeah.
I also, I'm auto mechanic, things like that, can do a lot of things. So for a while, I was actually like going to leave the bike industry, and I shouldn't say a while. We're talking about a gap of 2 weeks here. And then basically after the news got to Taiwan that I was no longer at the company, the steel frame factory that made all of Salsa's steel frames, owned by a family, tight-knit family I was pretty tight-knit with. They called me up. They're like, hey, what are you doing? I was like, I don't know. Like, well, you want to start your own bike company? We'll help you out. It's like, all right, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Like letterally, that was where it kind of came from, is like, we were sitting there going, what's next for me? Oh, they called me. Let's start a bike company. Right?
Yeah, why not? I know how to do that. Well,
Right?
you know how to make the bikes.
I know how to make the bikes.
That's a big part of it.
And also at that time, there was some stuff where...
and also, I'm just going to interject real quick. Not only did you know how to build the bikes, but you had the experience of being in the industry with one of the biggest, especially in this sector of sports, right? Salsa Cycles.
Yep.
So you were privy to the intimate interactions, how to run a business. What do I need to do over here? What do I need to do over here? And you might not know how every piece works, but you got a crash course for however long you were there, 10 plus years on the inside workings of running a bike company. So you were in a pretty good position.
Exactly. It was in a good position. And like I said, having the support of like the factory, like that's the barrier to entry to starting a bike company for most people, is understanding how the manufacturing works and the contacts. It's a pretty secretive thing over there. There's a lot of people that think, oh, you can just show up with a pile of cash and get your stuff made. First of all, Asian business is based on relationships, not necessarily money. They care more about whether they like you or not, over whether you have a pile of money. In fact, typically a lot of Asian factories view somebody showing up with a pile of money as that's going to be a problem, right? There's going to be some problem with that later on.
That's a good perspective to have.
It is, right? So they definitely have a different business approach than we do. And so there was that. And then on top of that, there was also some things I knew that Salsa was changing, primarily moving away from steel bikes. Steel bikes are definitely one of my passions. And so I was like, yeah, all right, I'm gonna start a steel bike company. And like we talked about before with this Schwalmingen 100, we're always giving the profits of that away, right? We're like, okay, maybe there's something to a bicycle company that does that same thing.
Yeah.
Right. We went around and actually for a few months, started to learn about, because the one thing I didn't know how to do was like how to run a company, like the finance side of it, the accounting side of it. And I was like, okay, so how does this work? We went to like some, what are they called? Accelerator or incubator business things in Minneapolis, and found out that Minnesota was actually starting this thing called benefit corporations, which they're in Minnesota law, it was called 403B, which was essentially this blend of a nonprofit and a for-profit. So behind the scenes, you were a legal C corporation, which is a for-profit corporation, but you had this layer over the top of it, this legal layer over the top of it, requiring you to have more than just profit as your reason for existing, right? Because like literally when you go file a C corporation filings, lawyers advise you for your purpose of corporation, lawyers typically advise you to pursue all legal means of profit. It's literally like the corporate charter for
you're there to make money.
Many C corporations, right? But this 403B was a layer over the top. And then on top of doing that, it was like an open January 2nd the next year, and there was this big high-powered law firm downtown that was going to like help us for free to like do it all for the first 10 companies wanting to do this thing. So we signed on with this high-powered law firm that did all this cool stuff for us for free, and we started as a benefit corporation. That's how we launched Advocate, and definitely learned a few things through that. Like for one is Advocate pledged to give 100% of its profits for back to cycling advocacy, of which we did. In 2 years, we returned a little less than, I think it was like $78,000 or a little less than $80,000 for 2 years of bike sales. I think we sold 500 bikes or something in those 2 years, which is super proud of, but definitely learned like, okay, that's not long-term sustainable. And I think there was a bunch of idealism in all of that, because also Minnesota dissolved the benefit corporation system because basically
people were taking advantage of it, I bet.
Maybe that, but
maybe
also
not y'all, but
I think there were a whole bunch of us going, cool, we all had some, rose-colored glasses on. This was a great idea, but it's not long-term sustainable. Businesses have to be profitable to have that money to build up a baseline, to grow, to pay their employees. Like being stable and just, being able to pay your employees and add more employees and have employees that, don't worry about a paycheck. That's a huge part of just simply building a solid business, right? And so I think at that point, rose-colored glasses was like, oh, I don't want to be this money-mongering profiteer. I'm going to give all my money away. But you need that money to like support the people that support you and grow the company and do better things. And so definitely changed my mind over the time, but also at that time. So so that was then when we quite proud of those 2 years we did, but transitioned everything into a straight up normal C corporation as Esker.
Yeah. It's one of the things that really cued me into what you were doing back in the Advocate days. And I was so into it, right? Like anti-corporation for, giving back to the community, doing good with those dollars. And that's awesome. And I'm actually still sad I never bought one, because like it was always a bike that I was like strongly considering. And
Odia has an OG Hayduke, an Advocate Hayduke, and she will not let it go.
She shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly.
That is a lifetime bike for sure. But you can also, as a for-profit company, do good things with that money and still run your company in philanthropic ways and environmentally sustainable ways. There are other ways that you can do things with that money that are still good.
Absolutely.
And you have ownership of that money, so you get to kind of control the direction. And then, like if you want to grow a business, you need that revenue to be able to grow, to be able to market, to be able to bring on Alexander Houchin and help her, do things to help, because if you can't grow if you can't sustain the business, if you can't feed it and give it what it needs, that it's not going to be able to be a successful business. So it's a beautiful and a romantic idea, and I give you all the credit in the world for trying that. But there's nothing wrong in and having ownership over that, and really giving your company the best chance of success, right? Like if you're pouring everything into all of your years of experience, your heart, your passion, you have this company, it's your baby, you want to give it the best chance of success, and money's a good way to do that.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So take us in. So that I was curious about how it transitioned from Hayduke into Esker. Was there, I don't know if there was a gap. I don't know if that was a business decision with the rebranding and everything. What?
There were two parts to it. At the same time, Dave Weigel, famed suspension designer, is a good friend of mine. He and I did the split pivot bikes at Salsa, and became good friends. And through some other patent stuff, he was no longer working with Salsa with the split pivot stuff. I was already on my own doing this, and already knowing that Advocate was going to need to become a profit center. And I had gone out and seen Dave, and I had actually pitched Dave on another bike brand doing medium cost aluminum frames using his DW Link suspension frame or suspension design. And Dave's like, yeah, we should do something together. Let's do something together. It's like, cool. So we go out there, and myself and Anders Brosty was one of our co-founders. He was an engineer at QBP. He was the engineer behind Problem Solvers. Like when you saw Problem Solvers do all kinds of awesome new little fitment widgets, that was all Anders' ideas. He was behind Whiskey, 45 North, some other stuff. He actually left QBP before me, and then he was one of my co-founders of Esker. So with the suspension was actually kind of separate from what was going on with the steel hardtails at that time. And but we went out to meet Dave Weigel. Took my brother Ryan was also one of our co-founders, and then Jason Ness, a friend of mine who was our industrial designer. Four of us were essentially the co-founders of Esker. We went out to meet Weigel to talk about this idea. Didn't have the name Esker at that point, and Dave's like, "Hey, well, yeah, I've got the DW Link patent. We could do this thing, but I've got this other patent that is called Orion. It behaves a little bit different. It actually behaves." At that time, riding suspension bikes, I was riding all Ibises. I was riding a Mojo 3 and a Ripley, I think, or Ripley LS. And I really liked Ibis's ride feel. Dave's like, and on top of that, this Orion is designed for 1x drivetrains only. Like the way the patent is written, it can only work with 1x drivetrains. This had to be 2016 when 1x drivetrains were becoming normal. We're like, okay, I think we can build a bike around 1x only.
Yeah.
That was a novel idea at that point, right? And I think we can do this patent. And then with all of my partners, we said, okay, well, if we got a different patent and we have kind of a different approach to the market, let's kind of go bigger into this. Let's not think about the medium cost alloy. Let's build carbon fiber, because again, at that time, carbon was everything, right? And all that. And I was like, cool. And we kind of decided we're going to do that. But then starting a suspension brand with carbon fiber, that's a $500,000 endeavor.
Yeah.
None of us had $500,000, right? So we were also like, okay, definitely this has to be a profit-based company, because if we're going to find $500,000, somebody's going to give us $500,000 to start this. They're going to want some return on their investment.
Yeah.
Right. So definitely that was a for-profit corporation. Weren't necessarily scared of it at that point. And then we were also trying to figure out what to do with Advocate. We're like, all right, well, the bikes are good. We love the bikes. Let's, why don't we just spin them into Esker? And that actually got Esker going. It got Esker some early revenue earlier, right? Because we weren't just going to launch with one carbon bike. We launched Esker with the LCAT 27.5 150 travel suspension bike, carbon suspension bike, and the Hayduke, which was already there from Esker. So we launched on that and grew from there. So we already had some kind of easy established revenue with the Hayduke, right? And that definitely helped keep things moving along right away.
Yeah, and some familiarity with the general public.
Yeah,
you've already built up, like, the Hayduke has a reputation. And
exactly.
Kind of the cool thing, I mean, I feel like Hayduke and Esker, you got to kind of be in the know, you know.
Yeah.
You gotta be in the bike industry and be like, know what's going on and be like, oh yeah, those bikes over there are looking pretty cool.
Yep.
Yeah. What was I gonna ask you though? Oh, what does Esker mean? Where did the name come from?
So Esker is a glacial ridgeline. It's a geologic term.
So we don't have any of that.
Yeah,
where
you don't.
I'm at.
Yeah, I know it's a little flat around here,
or cold weather,
right? Honestly, it's not all that different. We just had the glaciers up by us. So what an esker is when the glaciers covered the land up where we are in Wisconsin and Minnesota. They're thick, and just like any glacier now, rivers still run on top of the glaciers as the glacier is melting, right? That river deposits rocks and sediment and things like that in the bottom. So like there's, fully dirt bottomed rivers on top of glaciers. When that glacier retreats, it leaves all that dirt and sediment pile as a ridge line on the ground. So in the upper Midwest, you'll see them, you can really see them on topographic maps, but you can also just see them out in the wild. Where it'll be flatter land. There's just this ridge line, 30 feet tall, maybe 100 feet tall, steep sides that flows like a river. And you're like, wow. And in quite a few places in our area, you build a trail on the knife edge of the Esker.
That's what I'm wondering. Yeah,
so there's Esker trails in several places,
Okay.
including the Chequamegon area. It wasn't necessarily, because that's my area from there, people are like, oh, did you name it after that trail? Like, not exactly. And my brother, Ryan, who was Esker's marketing manager for the first 4 years, came up with the name. He's from there too, but it was just, for us, it was 2 syllables.
Right.
Rolls off the tongue well. It's not a term that's used very well. Like in today's day and age, a lot of marketing is Google ranking, and picking a name that isn't Googled and like used by a bunch of other things where other people are coming up on top of you.
Right.
So it was like, I remember going through the process, Ryan came back to us with, a list of like 30 names, right? And we just kept whittling it down of like, oh, I know that name's trademarked, can't use that. Or, oh, this other company's using that name for this, so we're going to get beat by Google on that. And so we just whittled it down, and that was the one we liked.
I'm still in shock that nobody had thought about Bikes or Death before me.
I know, right?
Like
right?
On any platform. I got every single platform.
Right.
Because it's just ride or die, skate or die.
Right.
It's that same. I just changed it a little bit.
Yeah.
But very grateful that no one had thought about that, because I feel like a name is it's crucial.
It is. Oh, it's extremely crucial. Right?
You got to be able to identify with it. You got to be able to say it. It's got to have a nice ring to it.
Yep.
Speaking of names, I mean, so for me, I'm a huge Edward Abbey fan.
Yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned on this one or the Come Ride With Me, but I've got a monkey wrench from Edward Abbey's book, The Monkey Wrench Gang. So I have the monkey wrench tattooed on my thigh. And Hey Duke is a character in the Monkey Wrench Gang.
Yep.
Do y'all have any other Edward Abbey tie-in names? I feel like you did with Hey Duke, or with Advocate.
With Advocate, we had the Seldom Seen, who was another character
the Seldom
in that book.
Seen. That was the other one. Yeah.
So where our names come from, what we actually gravitated towards with Esker now is all of our names are defenders of wild spaces.
Yes.
Right. So I think being, like you and I were talking about before, I ride bikes because I just want to be outside. Ended up finding out that mountain bikes are my favorite way to be outside, but we hike, we river raft, we canoe, we do all kinds of stuff, right? I just like being outside.
Yeah.
And so defense of wild spaces, extremely important to me. Edward Abbey comes in because I want to say I was about 19 or 20 years old, I think, on my first trip to Moab. A friend of mine, I was just soaking in Canyonlands National Park going, oh my God, this is amazing. And this friend of mine, we went to the Canyonlands Visitor Center. He bought Desert Solitaire, gave it to me. He goes, you got to read this.
Have to.
Right? And that completely changed the direction of life at that point, 100%. Right? Or at least values, what was important to me at that time, right?
Right. It opens up your mind.
Opens up your mind quite a bit. Then I literally went back to school, because I think that was the year I dropped out of college in between. I think that was the year I went then back to school, and then went and got a minor in literature by going and talking to a professor who was also into wilderness writing, and basically having him let me self-structure my minor by just reading everything Edward Abbey had ever written, along with a bunch of others. And he kind of coached me through it. Super cool. And so yeah, defensive wild space is important to us, right? So all of our names now on our bikes come from characters that are defenders of wild spaces. So
I love that.
Hey Duke, obviously defender in an interesting way, right?
Yep.
Eco terrorism is not necessarily something we're advocating for, but he came at it as like, I'm going to defend wild spaces. But all of our other names now, Jaffe is Jaffe Rider from the Dharma Bums by Jack Kerouac.
Okay.
Jaffe Rider, it was actually, Jack Kerouac did an interesting thing where when he wrote all of his books, he used these fake names, but they were real people. Because he didn't know if these real people wanted to be identified.
Kind of like Monkey Wrench.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's exactly it. Like Hey Duke is Doug Peacock, right? Well-known grizzly researcher and wildlands advocate. And Jaffe Rider was Gary Snyder, the Beat Generation wilderness poet, who's really well known for his work in defending the Sierras, defending spaces out there. And then, of course, the Lorax, pretty self-explanatory. Everyone knows the Lorax story, things like, and so that's where all of our names come from. Now we're actually venturing into also like some newer bikes we're doing. The Smokey has just come out, Smokey the Bear.
Oh,
everyone knows Smokey the Bear is,
only
defender of public lands, right?
Only you can ride your damn bike.
Exactly.
That's what he says, I think.
And so, we, whether they're book characters or cartoon characters in this, or maybe not cartoon. What's the word I'm looking for? Illustrated fictional characters with such as Smokey the Bear. That's where all of our names come from, and it's really important to us. Kind of the only reason we do all this is to go outside. Yeah. So we feel we need to defend it.
I can't agree with you more. I mean, I think once I read Desert Solitaire by Edward Abbey, it really gave me kind of a playbook and a mission for how I can live my life. And the podcast is very much a iteration of that, of like, how can I inspire, educate, inform, and get people excited about going outside, but doing it in an ethically responsible way. And like, the thing is like, I don't have to proselytize it too much, I don't think, because when you go outside and when you spend time outside and you realize the value that it has, you will naturally want to protect it and defend it, And so my whole mission statement is to make more people like that go outside. Like you said, the bike is the modality. It's our favorite way to access the outdoors, but the outdoors are the thing. And the more people we can have outdoors enjoying it, the more people we have defending it and advocating for it and telling their friends what a great time it is, and know we shouldn't build that housing development, and know that pipeline shouldn't go through there, and know we shouldn't reduce the size of Bears Airs. Like, we have to. Edward Abbey was a great example, and I agree with you. He's not a role model.
Right.
He's not a role model.
He's a conundrum. He's contradictory. And
but I think like in life, we have to take the good and parse out the bad. And we don't have to follow his example exactly as to way he did it. But I can admire his passion for the same thing that I had. And I can come to this space with my own passion and my own perspective. How can I move the needle in my own way? But I don't remember where I was going with that. But yeah, he has shaped the trajectory of my life greatly. And I don't agree with everything that he did or the way he did it, but it was a different time, and more power to him.
Exactly.
And the thing, he's inspiring. So we're sitting here talking about it right now.
Exactly.
So you have to take the good with the bad.
And I think that's that is kind of to talk about the flip side of protect. Like, we make consumer products. Right. Making consumer products has waste, right? Yep. Like, these things get painted. Painting isn't necessarily the nicest thing ever, and they get shipped across the ocean and in big ships, and there's trash, from shipping. And so, getting people outside, like you said, I firmly believe that when you show people the wilderness, when you get people outside, when you show them what there is, that's when they become attached to it, develop a sense of place, and then have the willingness to defend it. And that's how I justify, maybe to myself sometimes, like, what we're doing, even though there are destructive elements to what we're doing, because we're making products. But that's how we justify what we do. Like, my wife and I met, we were naturalists. We were in a grad school program called Wolf Ridge up in northern Minnesota, where, we were naturalists, and we were teaching sixth and seventh graders, like essentially environmental science curriculums in this outdoor school, which was super cool. And we did that for a year. And that was where I learned I didn't want to be a teacher. So that's why I'm not doing that anymore. But, that also developed a real, that was where we both firmly believe in that whole thing of if you just simply bring people outside and you show them, they're going to be more likely to develop that sense of place and protect that stuff. And so that's the root of kind of coming back to what we do, which gives me what's the word I'm looking for? Gives me fulfillment in what I do.
Yeah, exactly.
And that what we're doing has a positive impact on the world.
Yeah. The world is messy. Yeah. It really is.
Right.
But one thing I do want to defend you a little bit. I read in an article that one thing that you said was, I don't want to sell you, what did you say exactly? Something I'm not just trying to get you to buy a new bike for fun. I'm trying to find the person that needs a bike, and we'd like for you to consider us kind of thing. So you're not pushing the N+1, narrative that we hear a lot. Is more and this is kind of my thing is we talked about how many bikes I own. I don't own that many bikes, I really want to get the right bike and have that purchase and have it last me for a really long time.
Yeah, that's a big part of kind of now transferring into that idea of reducing waste, and that it's a big part of our durability story when we talk about, we want durability for bikepacking, but for me, it's also about reduced waste. So our frames have a lifetime warranty, right? Everybody in the industry has a lifetime warranty now. But there's a difference in a lifetime warranty where you've factored in the cost of, maybe a 50% chance of replacing that product for the customer later on, or whether you've built a lifetime warranty because we've built this product where it truly will last a lifetime. We choose that way because a lifetime warranty is great because you're going to get a replacement frame if it breaks, but that's more waste. Right? That frame gets wasted.
Yep.
All of the production of the new frame creates waste and things like that. And so we try to reduce that as much as possible in all aspects we do. The first thing is making frames that truly last. When we put our warranty rate is 0.02 or 0.2%.
Wow.
The bicycle industry average of a warranty rate is about 2%. So we're 90% better than the bicycle industry.
That's the right way to say that. Yeah.
And just in our warranty rate, which is great. Typically our warranties aren't frames breaking. They're typically just normal manufacturing errors, head tube oversize or something like that.
That's why you said I don't apologize for them being a little bit heavier. I mean,
exactly.
That's the trade-off.
That's the trade-off.
Yeah. And you don't want to be in the business of having to deal with warranties from a business perspective.
Right.
That's just more work for you to do. And plus there's an environmental aspect to that too. So it makes sense. It makes sense from a business perspective to just make better bikes.
Yeah. And then we try to bring that to other things we do too. Within our warehouse, we reuse as much of stuff as possible. So we're actually quite proud out of our warehouse. We put out one contractor bag of garbage a week.
Oh, wow.
That's the only garbage we do. Everything else is either recycled or reused. So Minnesota's really good. We have plastic film recycling. Most of the waste we create is plastic film, plastic bags. And there's good plastic film recycling in Minnesota that actually gets recycled. So that's good.
Right.
So there's that. But then even things oftentimes we'll get a customer that'll write us a note or something. They'll be like, hey, so I just got my bike. Did you guys just fill this thing with a bunch of used cardboard in this box? And it's yeah, actually we did. We try to tell that as much as possible. Recycling is good. Reusing is better, right?
Yeah.
Reducing one more step. And so even when we pack a bike box, cardboard dividers sometimes are the wheel box, the wheels came in, we'll cut up the wheel box and use that as the divider, right?
So much.
And things like that, as opposed to, recycling the wheel box and buying fresh dividers, right?
Yeah.
So we literally have had one bike shop in particular that a friend of mine works at, so I can say this, that they were calling us and they were on the verge of being annoying, being like, this thing shows up looking like it was packed with garbage. Come on, man. It's not garbage. We're reusing as much as possible. That's intentional from us. That's who we are. He's like, well, you guys should use fresh material so it looks better. I'm like, nope.
Nope.
I don't care if it looks better. It's not who we are. That's not what we're doing. So
yeah,
if
I'm
you
on
don't-
your side.
right?
If
Yeah.
I didn't get the benefit of receiving my bike by mail, I got the better experience where you
Mhm.
brought it to me. But if I had opened it, I would have been like, oh, that's fucking ingenious.
Yeah.
You know, like I
Yeah.
would have immediately been like, that's a better way to do it.
Yeah. Cause yeah, like for instance, like, so your wheels, you have our, the No Tubes Flow wheel set on it. That wheel set, we actually, so No Tubes has a couple different levels. These are actually, hand built in the United States. So No Tubes buys obviously their hubs and rims are made overseas, but they bring that in. They hand build, the wheels to order for us in Pennsylvania, which is pretty cool. But then the downside of that is they don't come mass packed. Every pair of wheels comes up to us in Minnesota in its own cardboard box. So yeah.
So you got a lot of wheel
So,
boxes.
so we got a lot of wheel boxes. So that's one of the
That's
areas we
smart.
try to cut down is reusing cardboard.
That's smart. See where we are. So much stuff to talk about. I want
good.
to Alexander Houchin.
Yeah.
Is it Houchin or Houchin?
I believe it's Houchin.
I believe it is too. I interviewed her.
Odia. How does Alex say her last name? Do you remember? Houchin.
It is Houchin.
All right, we got
Okay.
confirmation.
I've been
Houchin.
saying that for years, so I'm glad to be proven right. But it's always a discussion.
Yeah.
So most people know Alexander Houchin. She
Yeah.
recently, at the beginning of the year, I think it was March, signed up to be Esker Cycles' first sponsored rider.
Correct. Yep. We've had ambassadors for a long time. She is our first sponsored rider athlete that we are paying
That's a good
to
get.
ride bikes for us.
That's a good get.
It
how
is.
How did that come to be?
Well, same thing. I've been following Alex's exploits forever, and just always impressed by what she's accomplished, what she's doing,
Her stare,
most-
her flair,
her flair, but
her
mostly
style.
that's the thing. Mostly attracted to her style. So, kind of more again, and this is actually a funny kind of anecdote or discussion between Alex and I when we were essentially flirting to get this started up, right? Is I don't market racing. If you'll ever look at Esker marketing, we don't market racing. We don't market the sell on Sunday or win on Sunday, sell on Monday approach, right? I think trying to sell your product because it won an event is lazy marketing. So that's not who we are, right?
Yeah.
And so I said, we don't market racing. Well, anyways, so Alex and I were talking because she's known Chris Reichel, our marketing manager, for a long time. I've known her peripherally. Odia works in Native communities, so knows a lot of people she knows. And so we kind of got together, had this whole flirtatious feeling each other out. Like, what are we doing? Are we going to work together? Right. And that's one thing I said is like, okay, this is cool, but we don't market racing. And at first she was like, oh, I don't know if this is a fit. I'm a racer. I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, you're a racer. That's cool. It's not to say we're not going to talk about what you're doing, but we had to really go into this nuanced conversation of what that meant and kind of talk about all these examples of that. Like, absolutely, we're going to support you to the end of the earth. But if you take first place or if you take last place, I want to tell the story of what your adventure was out there. And I'm going to tell the story of your adventure and your exploits equally, whether you took first place or last place.
Yeah.
I don't care if you win.
100%.
She's like, well, I care if I win. I'm like, good. I want you to win
Go
too.
win.
Personally, I want you to win. I want you to get your goals, but I don't care. Like, I want you because you're doing cool things. You're a happy, persuasive person. Like, for us, it's all about being positive, right? Like, I could have, like, the top Tour de France pro come to me and be like, hey, I'm going to ride for you for free. But if he's an asshole, nope, he's going away. Don't care.
Right.
Right. Do not care. That's what's important to us is positive, good humans. And Alex is one of them. So that's why we have her. And so, yeah, we kind of came around to like understanding each other and what that meant. And the great thing is, now that we're into this, like, also working out contracts and all this other stuff, trying to figure each other out during that time. There's a whole bunch of things like who we are that we just can't put in a contract, right? Where it was great because Alex was in Minnesota maybe a month ago. She's been doing some gravel races and flying out. And so the big airport in Minnesota is 3 miles from our house. So she comes and stays at our house when she needs to fly out. And her and I were having this conversation as I was driving her to the airport. She's like, I just love how you're supporting us. Like, cause they come and stay at our house. We receive bikes, ship bikes for them, do all this stuff. She's like, this support is just amazing. I'm like, well, that's who we are. And that's the kind of stuff we couldn't put in a contract, but
Right.
I told you we're going to support you.
Yeah.
We're going to support you.
Yeah.
That's the stuff we're going to do. And so I think we see each other really well now. We're jiving.
Good.
I'm really liking what her and Johnny are doing out there. They're both.
So you got Johnny on one of your bikes too.
Johnny
huh?
is an ambassador for us. So her partner Johnny is an ambassador for us. He's on a Hayduke, and then Alex is our
She's a
sponsor.
Jaffe.
Alex floats all over. What does she have now? She has a steel Hayduke.
Okay.
She has a Thai Jaffe. I gave her my personal Thai Lorax because we got a really good review. Shout out to Neil Belchenko at bikepacking.com.
Hey Neil.
And basically blew the forecast out of the water. Like Neil put out his good review on the Lorax Thai, and we just sold everything and had nothing in stock.
Such a cool bike.
Right,
Such
it
a
is.
cool bike.
So yeah, Alex has a bunch of bikes. She rotates around based on what she's doing.
So she's on the Arizona Trail Race 800.
She is.
Last I checked, she was leading.
Cool.
And she's single. She's single.
She's
speed.
single speed.
Yeah.
Yep.
She's
absolutely.
definitely leading the single speed for sure. What is she riding on AZT? Do you even know?
Yeah, she's on a steel Hayduke.
Okay.
And with all of her other sponsors that help her out in amazing ways, like I also give massive thanks to everyone else that's supporting her. So Cane Creek, Industry 9, Wolf Tooth, Doom Bars. Hoping I'm not forgetting somebody else in there. Disperse Bags. All of us putting together this package so that Alex can be a full-time racer.
Oh yeah.
It's so awesome. I love all of them. I mean, I love all their products on their own anyway, right? Like I ride a Helm, I ride Industry 9 wheels, right? Like,
yeah.
So, great stuff as well, but, they're also just great to have along on the ride. So yeah, she's on that whole setup, and yeah, I think she's flying.
Yeah. Really excited to see y'all, join up together. And it's cool to see, the support for Alexandra and what she's doing. It seems like she's continuing to get recognized for her impact in the community. She's also a great racer. I'm kind of like you. I'm like, I don't care if you win or lose or whatever. I'm more interested in the person, the story, and
exactly,
and that kind of that angle. But yeah, it was super cool and exciting. And I rode a Chumba Stella tie at the same time she was running a Chumba Stella tie, and now I'm just gonna keep following her wherever she goes.
Perfect.
That's my new business model.
Good.
What was our next question? Oh, I had kind of a fun question. Where is it? Here we go. For Esker at this stage right now, how is a new bike born? What goes into deciding to spend all the money and everything and like, I'm going to build this bike? Or maybe y'all have a complete lineup and you're not really looking at introducing new bikes right now, but just historically, how does a new bike come to be?
That's a great question because we do not have a regimented method.
Okay.
Right. So coming from the corporate side, when I was at QBP, like there we had they're called product concept documents. It's a long document, all this stuff, checks and balances, what's going to cost, blah, blah, blah. All these things that had to get approved by like 6 different people and all this, right? So going into a small brand, and the folks that are working with me right now, all also have corporate experience. So we're calling Esker kind of the anti-corporate exercise for all of us in our careers right now. So we honestly, we don't have like, here's exactly how a product flows through. So we're sitting here next to a Hayduke LVS,
yes.
Which is a great, so I'll use a couple anecdotal examples here.
All right.
Because the Hayduke LVS is one side of the picture, and then we have other stuff on the other side. The LVS came to be because I worked on the Salsa Black Burro. Right?
Just say what the LVS is for anyone who doesn't know.
Sorry. This is our long tail bike packing bike for hauling extra gear. So it's our Hayduke that has 600 millimeter rear chainstays for hauling a lot of extra gear, has space behind the seat tube for bike packing. It's its own animal. It's special. Look it up online if you don't know what it is.
I think Jay Peterberry, in my perspective, is the one who popularized this bike whenever he announced that he was going to be riding this on his Divide Unearthed.
Right. And that's where this story goes, is into Jay. So the funny thing is, because I'd ridden the Salsa Blackborough, it's basically the same thing, but as a fat bike.
Mm-hmm.
And riding it, I was like, this bike isn't just for carrying cargo. It actually rides really good with this longer rear end. Climbs like mad because the rear end just digs extra traction, all this. And I was like, you know what? I really want that, but as a 29er, right? So I had a prototype built for myself, and I rode it for a year and a half, I want to say. It's just a thing for me, right? And then when Chris Reichel joined Esker, he came up to the Minnesota warehouse one day, was like, what's that? I'm like, that's my bike. He's like, we need to sell that. I'm like, really? You think we can sell that? I'm like, I think it's cool, but I thought it was so weird that nobody else would want it, right?
Yeah.
Chris like, we need to sell that thing. I'm like, okay, let's talk about putting it in production. So with our tie vendor, it's in tie first because we have much smaller minimum order quantities to make something in titanium than in steel. And for something this unique and weird, for that matter, we're like, let's start small. Let's see what the market looks like for this, because at that point, Chris really wanted one for himself. We're like, this is just a weird thing. We're going to if we sell 20 in the first year, maybe that's okay. But we're going to make it because we want it. It's who we want to be. It's a really cool thing we can show the world. And we'll see what happens, right? So we put it into production that spring. And like I said, 20 unit minimum order. So we were building 20 of these. And we were like, you know what? If it takes us a year to sell 20 of these, I'm okay with that. Let's just see what happens, right? Well, then the funny thing was, Jay and Chris knew each other really well, because Chris, when he was at Revel, was also sponsoring Jay. Jay and I know each other really well. Jay saw that Chris was at Esker, calls Chris and is like, hey, I got this idea for this bike. I really want to do this bike. It's this idea I have for doing this big solo mission down the Tour, or Great Divide for him.
Yeah, true.
Right?
It's
the
Great
distinction,
Divide.
the distinction, right?
Important distinction.
And he rattled something off to Chris, and Chris goes, you need to call Tim. And so Jay gives me a call, and Jay rattles off what he wants. And so I'm on my phone. I'm like, sent back a picture. I'm like, you mean this?
Kind of
He's
like this?
Like literally he described this bike to the T. What he wanted drop bars on it, right? Which is how he ran his bike. So I'm sure he would have done a little bit different front geometry. But he described this bike to the nuts of what we were going to produce, right? And I was like, so I sent him a picture. I'm like, you mean like this? He's like, oh my God, is that a thing? I'm like, actually, they're in production. We're launching them in June. Yeah, we can get you a sample. So we sent him the sample, which was the Fayetteville bike he was hit on. But yeah, we sent him one. He loved it.
Not the bike's fault.
Not the bike's fault.
Not Jay's fault.
Nobody's fault except an inattentive driver.
Yes. Yeah, I did an episode on him, about that incident, so anyone can go back and listen to what the whole story.
Exactly. And so we basically actually to do what Jay was doing, we actually completely rearranged our launch because, like I said, Jay's been a friend of mine for a long time. I was super happy to support Jay with getting him the frame, got him doing. We actually pushed our launch back a little bit to coincide with what he was doing and did all kinds of stuff. Unfortunately, his ride ended early, but we still got it out there. But it generated enormous amount of buzz for this bike, and I'd say legitimized what we thought was a really weird bike. And thankfully we sold a lot more than we thought we would.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
And the cool thing is I would say it's still slow uptake overall. Like we definitely sold more than we thought we would, but it's still definitely not flying or anything. But the cool thing about it is, like, when you went and rode it around, it's another one of those bikes that you just need to ride to understand. When people first see it, they're like, that is dumb. Everyone's trying to get shorter chainstays. Why would you guys make them 6 inches longer on purpose? But you ride it and it's a whole different animal, right?
Yeah.
It's so cool. And we're getting that word of mouth out there now that it's been on the market for about a year. Lots of our riders that have them are telling the story about how good it rides or these cool adventures they're doing. And we're getting like the second wave has actually been starting lately of like, oh yes, so I saw so-and-so had this thing and did this cool thing. I want one. So it's a slow burn because it's unique and takes a while for people to wrap their head around. But anyways, I think, I don't know how much of Jay's plan is out there yet, but we've got Jay a new bike. I know he's still getting stronger and still coming back. He's not 100% yet, but I think he said this publicly that I know he's going to be making another attempt on the bike again.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see. I mean, just for him, I want to see him get some redemption. That's a terror. That's the worst way you could end a ride.
Right. Exactly.
So
exactly.
I'd love to see him. And I've just been watching his recovery process, and my heart just goes out to him. I mean, that's tough. And it seems like he's doing a lot better. I'm excited to talk to him again and kind of get the full update on how he's doing. But I see him out there riding his bike all the time, and so it's great to see him back out there. What? Oh,
but then I guess to answer the other side of your question, like
please.
you were asking about product development, the other side of it is then we do sometimes go full corporate and have to like define everything. So you probably noticed right now on the Esker website and what we have for sale, we don't have any suspension bikes for sale.
Yep.
But
I was going to ask you about
got our
that.
start with Dave Weagle's Orion technology and suspension bikes. I can definitely say suspension bikes are coming back to Esker. We're not done. We're just taking our time to develop and do a really good job and do right what exactly we want.
All right.
So I can definitely say, look in March. We're bringing stuff back to the market.
All right.
But what that is, but then like on that side of it, like working with Dave Weagle, Dave and I have some very specific ways we talk about geometry, kind of back all to that balance we talked about before. How Dave and I talk about geometry would just like blow people's minds. It's also secret sauce, so we don't talk too much, but like when we talk about geometry, we have this like formula and method of calculation. We don't even talk about head angle, seat angle, reach, none of those things. We talk about these other really strange variables in how the human is placed between the two wheels and stuff like that, that we first do all that. And then literally head angle, seat angle, those are all mathematical derivatives that pop out of a formula.
So you start with rider experience, rider feel,
exactly,
where the rider sits on the bike, and then you back end it.
Exactly. And we have some really strange numbers that the bike industry doesn't talk about at all. As far as how to calculate those things, and then spit it out. So like when we develop a bike with Weagle, it goes all the other way. Like product development matrix document defining every single thing to go into these formulaic things, and then those suspension bikes are way harder to develop. Lots and lots. Like a hardtail frame, the bill of materials of the frame has like 6 parts on it. A frame, a seat collar, a head badge, 2 dropouts, an axle, right? A bill of materials for a suspension bicycle is 80 pieces.
Oh, God.
Right? And sometimes, I think on our current stuff we're developing right now, I think there's 8 vendors making up those 80 pieces.
Oh, wow.
Right? And so it requires a different level of being very regimented. And so, so then sometimes we do that. Yeah.
What is your best-selling bike?
Hey Duke.
Yes.
By far. Yep.
I got the most popular. I don't know if I want, maybe I want the least popular. Maybe I want to be cool, even more of an outlier. I love the,
I think the thing is a brand and what they stand for, and then the products they offer should be kind of in these rings of circles, right? And the Hey Duke is iconic to who we are, right?
Yeah.
So it's the center of our circle, right? So therefore it should be our best selling unit, right? Like if what defines you is like this weird tiny little bit, and then it's tiny bit of what you sell, but then what funds you is completely peripheral to what you believe in. Like something's wrong with your brand.
Something's not synced up there.
So for us, Hey Duke being this durable, get on it immediately comfortable, bike packing capable, but also trail bike, neutral geometry, neutral fit that just like it feels like that comfy t-shirt, right? That's who we are. That's what we want to be.
T-shirt,
so
I love that.
That's our home base.
Yeah. Man, welcome home to me.
Yeah.
Mr. Hey Duke.
But then I'd say Lorax, we just introduced this summer, but the new Lorax is going to fast catch up and probably be number 2, which interestingly, because the new Lorax is from an engineering perspective, like there's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes in it, but from an engineering perspective, the new Lorax is a drop bar Hayduke.
Yeah.
Right. Like the steel one uses all the exact same tubes, rack mounts, fitments, and everything obviously it has its own geometry, a little bit of its own tube tuning. But that's exactly it. So that's core to who we are too.
Yeah, that man, I got my eye on that Lorax. I ain't gonna lie. I'm eyeing it pretty hard. What size tire can you fit on the Lorax?
Up to 2.6.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
How does it run? How does it perform with like a 48?
It won't. Oh, like a 48C?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm thinking 48 tooth chainring. I was like, it can't do that. 48C.
I don't run 48.
Honestly, what you're going to do there is you're going to, like, when you go narrow on a tire, you're also lowering the bike, right? And so we kind of say, like, I guess 48 is pretty close. 50C or 2.0 is what we call the lowest. So I'd say you're okay. What you're going to do, the bike was designed around 2.2 as that's where it was designed.
Right, okay.
So you can go up to 2.6. That'll raise you a little bit. 2.0 is probably or 48-ish would probably be the lowest I would recommend at all. Because in that sense, we're talking about 7. So 3, you're lowering the bottom bracket. You're lowering the entire bike about 3.5 millimeters, which that's right. Bottom bracket height, another not talked about very often data point, is actually one of the most important things to how a bike handles, right? Where your bottom bracket is in relativity to your axles is something people ignore a lot, but actually makes enormous difference in ride. 3 to 4 millimeters is about the difference where humans can actually perceive a 3 to 4 millimeter difference. So let's see, what would that do? Lowering that bike 3 millimeters would reduce mechanical trail, which would make the bike just a little bit quicker handling. That'd be about it. No,
I'm sold.
Yeah.
The narrowest tire that I will run is a 48C.
Yep.
I don't want to go any more narrow than that.
Yeah.
So a 50C, 2.2 sounds right up my alley.
We sell all of our Loraxes right now with Maxxis's 2.2 icon on it for a tire.
Oh, that's my favorite tire too.
Yeah.
The Recon that came on this Hayduke is my second favorite tire. So they're both great tires. I don't know, but the reason Icon is my favorite is because I've been riding it for 20 years and I know that tire so well.
Yep.
It's just such a good. That's what we just ordered for my girlfriend's Cutthroat. I got her because we're going to Oaxaca where it's chunky, so I got her the biggest ones is a 2.35.
Oh yeah.
On her Cutthroat. It's gonna be nice. It's gonna be good.
That'll fit. Yeah.
All right. I just have a couple state of the industry questions.
Sure.
I actually, sadly, and it's something I've been wanting to do, is have more conversations with people like that own a bike company or in the bike industry from this side of it.
Yeah.
Because it's a side that I'm not as familiar with. So first question, finish this sentence. The current state of the bicycle industry is
confusing.
Good answer. I'm not the only one.
But also I will say very positive, right? It depends on who you talk to and what their motivations are. You will definitely hear people say right now very negative, right? Things about it. So, and I guess the way I would define that is like, I'll say, Esker, we had our best year ever this year.
Congratulations.
Both in revenue and units moved. And also just in awesome things we did in positivity, right?
Yeah.
And we did that in a year that overall people are very negative about the bike industry right now. There's just a lot of bad news out there because everyone's like, oh, sales are down or everything has to go on sale.
Yeah, used market is flooded.
And honestly, I'm going to put that back on a bunch of the people that are complaining are the ones that caused it. Like, so we've all heard about the COVID bike boom and the COVID bike bust, right? Yeah. I mean, when COVID happened, bike demand went through the roof, right? Lots of new users to the sport, couldn't keep a bike in stock. And, I mean, there's no better way to put it, but greed made a bunch of people just go nuts.
Right.
Place these enormous purchase orders, which caused problems for all of us. Like as a small brand, we got forced out of a couple factories in Taiwan.
You can't get your products anymore.
Because literally some companies, when like one of our factories we got forced out of because the primary customer of that factory went in and bought all 36,000 units per year that
I've heard
company
this story
could make.
so many times.
Right?
Yeah.
But then we all sat here going, okay, a boom always comes with a bust, guys. But some of these people just kept placing purchase orders and going nuts and thinking it was never going to end. And then when it busted, they all got caught holding the bag, right? So they all, some of the major players, I heard 2 of the major players had over $1 billion in inventory at their high points. And it's like, that's insane. Like the unpowered market for bicycles in America is somewhere around 6 billion.
Wow.
Right. For 2 holders to have $1 billion in inventory each, and that's at wholesale value. So tack on 30% to that for retail value. So we're at literally half of the entire year's consumption.
Yeah, that's like
of
3
the
million.
bike industry
Or
is sitting in
did you
2
say
warehouses.
billion?
Billion.
Yeah, so 3 billion.
3 billion. So
Yeah.
half of the year's consumption of bicycles for the entire country is in 2 warehouses, right? And so that ended up, with all these situations of then, corporate accountants getting freaked out and putting, firing people and doom and gloom and things going on sale to
we've seen some bankruptcies.
Yeah, we've definitely seen some bankruptcies of some companies that were leveraged in the wrong way, or simply whatever their market was disappeared, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so there's a bunch of that. But I think if our motivations were different, at the same time we were small, we also kind of lucked into this being that small. And like I said, we got leveraged out of a couple factories during COVID. So we couldn't have over inventoried ourselves because we couldn't get enough stuff.
Yeah.
We couldn't even keep anything on our shelves during COVID. So we kind of lucked out of going into the boom with 0 in inventory, right?
Yeah.
Won't say it was entirely intentional on our part, but luck and somewhat of the right motivations. So we were sitting in a really good spot. Like these big companies that had all this over inventory, then they couldn't do any new product development, right? When you're sitting there having, what amounts to a year of inventory on hand, you can't go make the next cool thing and launch the next cool thing.
100%.
We could.
Right.
Because we didn't have that, right? So we got to do some cool new stuff when everyone else was stagnant. We just got to keep kind of being ourselves. And on top of that, I think also during COVID, there was a attraction towards expensive suspension bikes. That's what was kind of doing some sales during that time. A bunch of brands just simply abandoned hardtails. And hardtails are awesome for all kinds of reasons, right? Bye. And so we also found ourselves in this unique position of like, not a lot of cool hardtails out there, right? Like definitely a lot of cool, small creative brands like ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So I'm speaking now, not as just Esker, but I'm speaking on behalf of like everybody with us like Esker, right? Like we could name off
more boutique brands,
30 boutique brands in our size,
right,
making cool stuff. I think we all and I've talked with quite a few of the owners of various of these companies, and we're all kind of sitting here going, all right, keep our heads down. Let's do our thing. Yep. This is cool.
Yeah.
And then for the long term, the COVID bike boom definitely brought a ton of new riders to the sport, a ton of new attention to the sport. There's bike trail. There's an explosion of building of bike trails all over the country. Like in Minnesota, we saw like several different ride centers go in, like not just trail building, but like full on ride centers.
Nice.
In various areas. So where there was the boom, it went up, and then there was the bust. I think the plateau after the bust is still way higher than before the boom in 2019.
Yeah.
And so with that, I'm also really positive because then as Esker, and as bikepacking, things like that, people generally enter the sport riding mountain bike trails, riding single track mountain bike trails, right? Very few people enter the sport going, oh, I'm going to start bikepacking, right? Or things like that. And so we know that bikepacking is typically someone's 3rd, 4th, 5th bike, maybe, after they've been in the sport for a couple of years. Also, Esker, we're unique and special and small. We're never anybody's first bike, right? That's okay too. We're also their third, fourth, fifth bike after they're really deeper in as enthusiasts.
Right.
So we're sitting here going, okay, there's a pile of new people entering the sport that are going to be at those deeper enthusiast levels in a few years, and we'll be here for them.
Yeah, that's something I was aware of and kind of curious about during the COVID boom is, I mean, it's easy to, forecast this into the future, assuming that we didn't stay in a worldwide lockdown forever, which I was hopeful that we wouldn't.
Right.
But assuming that, then we know that not everybody's going to stay with bikes the way that they were during the pandemic.
Right.
But what we don't know is how many of those people are going to stick with it. We know we're going to see a drop.
Yep.
There's no doubt about it. But the net result has to be that we're left with a X percentage more cyclists in the market than what we had before.
Absolutely. And that's what I mean when I said like the plateau is higher than 2019.
Right. Yeah.
That's exactly what that is. Don't know what that gap is. There's a lot of smart people at People for Bikes trying to figure it out. And giving us information on it. But it's definitely, we're definitely, I would say, overall in the bike industry in a way better place than we were in 2019.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the negative narrative that we hear is because of the more prominent, bigger brands. We're hearing more about them in Velo News or whatever.
Yeah, that's it.
It's more visible to the audience, the community at large. And so we're seeing a lot of doom and gloom. But I have to echo what you're saying. As most people I talk to are in the more boutique side of things, is where I gravitate towards personally. And the conversations I'm having with them are much similar to yours. Like, keep my head down, make our bikes. We're going to be okay. We're not over inventoried. If anything, we're under inventoried, but we're selling what we have. And when you weather the storm, well, now we're left with more cyclists in the market than where we started.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, I think that is, it's headline, it's media based, because like Bicycle Retailer, they're going to, they're posting, so-and-so has way too much inventory.
Yeah.
I think actual headlines that were out there wasn't Fox Factory, because they're publicly traded, so all the info's public.
Oh,
I think they were down 30% this year.
Yeah.
And that's only because, like, I'm guessing here, I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm guessing like the four major big players probably make up 60-70% of Fox's bike sales volume, right? If all those guys are over inventory, they're not placing purchase orders.
Exactly.
Yeah, Fox is going to be down, of course. And Shimano was down too, right?
Yeah.
I don't think SRAM posted public numbers. I think SRAM is still fully privately held. So, which is cool. But so I'm they were probably down in some way though.
Yeah,
right.
That was my initial thought.
the big guys making up the bulk of the volume just aren't placing purchase orders.
Yeah.
But it'll all come
back. They'll get rid of that inventory one day, and they'll start buying it.
Yeah.
And SRAM and Shimano will all get back to where they want to be. Oh, was the first one a warning?
I think first one was a warning, and that's the shutoff.
All right, bye for real. Okay, so my world is adventure cycling, bikepacking. What can you tell us about that sector of the sport? I'm so in it, I'm blind to it, right?
Sure.
All I know is I see all the positives and wow, look at everything that's going on, and this is great. And it seems like it's a really, to use a term, emerging market. What do you think the state of adventure cycling is right now, and maybe the trajectory?
I'm very excited about where it's going. Kind of like I was talking about before, where I came from more of the outdoor world, right? And I do a lot of other outdoor sports. Cycling ends up being my number one, but I like all these other things. So, way back in my history, I did kind of pursued a little bit of a career of outdoor and adventure ed, environmental ed, things like that. So I've got a lot of friends in that world. And 15 years ago, it was a really weird space. There was the bike industry over here, and then there was the outdoor industry over here, and neither ever crossed. There were bikes, and I was like, but we're riding bikes outside. Like, What is going on here, right? And this space of bikepacking and adventure riding is really bringing them together, right? So you're seeing Patagonia's making bike clothes, right? Who is it? GSI is making bike-specific stuff, right? We're like...
Yeah, you're starting to see bike-specific tents and...
Bike-specific tents from... is it Big Agnes? Has that one with the short poles?
That's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah,
that's the one I was thinking of, yeah.
And then, so a friend of mine is a professor at Fort Lewis College in Durango, and I was just there talking to his class a couple weeks ago. And in this like these kids are going after a degree in adventure education. And in this classroom, half of them were riding mountain bikes.
Yes.
Like when I was in adventure education 15 years ago, that was not a thing. So mountain bikers were the weird side thing, right? And so then and then just also watching this change of like, like I said, 15 years ago, there was one dude selling bikepacking bags in his basement with Epic Eric, right? Now there's got to be 100 bike bag companies.
Yeah.
Like I think it's normalizing. It's also making mountain biking more approachable to folks that are just more
approachable. Yeah.
It's also making it so, especially approachable because, like I said, 15 years ago, mountain biking was racing. A lot of people go, "Oh, I'm not a racer. I can't do that." Now people are just seeing us go for overnighters on bikes and going, "I can do that.
Let's go on a tootle in the woods."
Yeah. So I think that the adventure segment of mountain biking and cycling as a whole is, I'm going to go out and say in 10 years is going to be the largest segment.
Boom.
Right. And it's going to bring in so many new riders to the sport. And then it's going to, rising tide raises all ships, however you want to say that. Right. Then we're going to see big brands, make consumer products that are even more dialed in for these functions. And just better accessories for all of it, making our lives better for doing these. And it's going to be awesome.
I think so too. That is the exact trajectory I think we're going down. And I think we're going to see, and we are seeing, I think we'll continue to see people be like, "Oh, I love to go camping. I love to ride bikes. I love to be outdoors. I love to ride bikes." And like my aha moment was like, "Oh, I can do this together
right
at the same time."
Yeah.
I like to do the 24-hour, 12-hour kind of endurance mountain bike racing. That was where I was at in my cycling career or whatever. When I learned about bikepacking, and I grew up in the Boy Scouts. I used to be a Boy Scout leader. And so just spend my whole life outdoors. That I've always considered myself an outdoorsman.
Yeah.
And so whenever I found that you could combine the two, it was just a no-brainer, and I think that is appealing to a lot of people,
Exactly.
And the more, the word gets out there, the more, bikepacking.com does their thing, and more Esker Cycle does their thing, making bikes, and then you got all the bag manufacturers, you got Ride with GPS. I mean, you got podcasts, like there's so much momentum that is bringing down the barrier to entry, and also kind of making it cool and more accessible,
Yeah.
People are like, I think I could do that too. All right. This might be my last question.
All good.
We're going to end on a fun one. Let's end on this one. I need to hear this story. I know very little other than you used your Tacoma that you lovingly refer to as the Stormtrooper to stop some car thieves that carjacked a BMW. I think I don't know anything, but what happened, man? Tell me that story.
Well, we have this 2013 Toyota Tacoma that is our adventure rig, right? So we have the company van right now, but normally this is being pulled by that truck. That's our adventure rig. And so, wanting to be outside all the time, that thing it's done 10 rounds of the white rim, with Odia driving and a bunch of us riding. So it's got all the fun off-road stuff on it. ARB bumper, rock slides. It's armored, right? So anyway, we live right in South Minneapolis. We live less than a mile from George Floyd Square. And when folks marched from George Floyd Square over to the 3rd precinct to burn it down, they marched past our house.
Okay.
Right? So we're right in it. Minneapolis is a great, great town, but definitely some of the rebound from that, there was rebound from all of those riots to then the police basically said, "Fine, you don't want us, we won't do anything." And our policing has been not very good in the last couple of years, right? And honestly, it hasn't been. Minneapolis is still a really beautiful, awesome place. The weird thing that's popped up is just these little petty crimes of essentially teenagers, in this case, 14 and 16-year-olds, doing stupid shit, right? And what they like to do is apparently jack cars and go on joyrides, right?
Sure. Who doesn't?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that sounds like a fun pastime, right? And so actually one day I was out in the street. We live on a pretty quiet street in South Minneapolis. I was out in the street actually getting the camper prepared to hook to the truck to go up to Duluth for the weekend. Odie and I were going up to Duluth. And this vehicle, I could hear it at the stop sign at the end of my road, just floor it, right? Just floor it. It had to be going 40 miles, 50 miles an hour past me on a 20 mile an hour street. And me being, the old man now that yells at clouds. I
Get off my lawn.
I literally, as I heard this vehicle accelerate, I jumped out from between my camper and my truck and just yelled at them, right? And then they just kept flooring it past me. So I jumped out in the street and gave the double middle finger in their rear view mirror, right? And they next block down went over and pulled over. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go yell at these people because, turning into an old man, right?
Yeah.
And somehow I had my uncle's truck there.
You don't also defend wilderness. You also defend your street.
My street, right? Yeah.
My street.
I want Minneapolis to be awesome because it is. So I'm like, I hopped in my uncle's truck, drove it down. And there was nobody outside this Jeep. It was parked in front of this house. So milling around this thing, taking some photos. I'm just going to call the cops or something. And the person inside the house yells out at me. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, is this your Jeep? It's like, no, but I just saw two kids in ski masks jump out of it. I'm like, oh, this will be fun. So I said, hey, call the cops. I'm going to go chase them down. So went in my uncle's truck around the corner, went and chased him down, found these two boys, 14 and 16 years old. Around the corner, I was like, hey, were you boys in that white Jeep? And they're like, no, it wasn't us. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it was you. No, it definitely wasn't us. I'm like, all right, whatever. So I drive back home. And, again, just the old man coming out here. As soon as I got home and parked my uncle's truck, I'm like, this doesn't sit right with me. I'm not okay with this. I'm going to go back and watch those kids. I'm going to call the cops, tell them where they are, right? Drive down, back right at the park. So in Minneapolis, we have this great system of lakes, right? So this is literally all happening Lake Hiawatha, right? Beautiful little lake with a park all around it in Minneapolis, which is just 2 blocks from our house. I'm back down there and go down to find these kids, right? And they weren't where I saw them before. And I turn onto the street bordering the park, and this BMW blows by me 60 miles an hour, passes me in the wrong lane in this, again, 20 mile an hour park, houses. I'm like, what on earth is going on today? This place is crazy.
Something in the water.
Right? And then I see that BMW go about 3 blocks further than me, stop. These kids run out of the bushes, definitely those 2 kids, hop in the car, and then it turns the wrong way down towards the community center on the lake. I'm like, oh, they're going the wrong way. All right, I'm going to go box them in, and then I'm going to yell at these kids, right? So I turn
purely motivated by wanting to yell at.
I just really wanted to yell at these kids.
They needed to hear what you had to say.
So I turned down the wrong way down the one way as well. And I'm going to box them in. And all of a sudden this car just freaks out, plows in, turns into a minivan, a parked minivan, backs into a pile of garbage cans, turns around, it's coming right at me. And I was, this was a blue BMW 5 Series, moderate car, and I'm in my armored truck, right? I'm like, and they floored it right at me.
Oh, God.
I'm like, all right, you guys want to play chicken, play dumb games, win stupid prizes.
Winner.
So I pinned them or hit them, right? And disabled their vehicle. And
head on?
Head on. Yep. Just and right at that point was then when I realized maybe something was really up, because then literally as I hit them, a cop car comes around the corner. Must have been why they had decided to turn around. They saw the cops coming. Another cop car comes up behind us. They all jump out of this disabled car, scatter, cops running, guns drawn, yelling, like all the craziness that you see, right? And I'm sitting there with my now disabled truck, all right? So I, got the truck towed back to the house and talking to the cops, and they were after those kids. Apparently they had the white Jeep earlier. They had robbed, probably at gunpoint based on the response,
Oh.
the fast response. Because, like I said, the police don't respond terribly fast, but they responded fast in this one. So
Because it was
something.
aggravated.
Yeah,
They're like,
must have been
okay, I guess we
something.
should
Yeah.
go check this
And
one out.
it was only after all that I realized, oh, I was just playing chicken with kids with guns. Oh, whoops.
Yeah. Okay, so that was going through my mind in this whole story. That never crossed your mind?
That didn't cross my mind until, after all that.
I live in Texas where,
Yeah,
I mean, it doesn't happen but like, honestly, like there's too many times where there's road rage and someone whips out a gun. Like it's too many times.
Yeah,
one time is too many times.
That's a little more foreign to us. Like I'm a gun owner, definitely have no problems there, but I don't carry my guns in my vehicle.
Right.
That's foreign to us, but sure.
Yeah. Man.
But a little more common down here, huh?
Do you think they would have caught him if it wasn't for you intervening?
That's so in I had to get interviewed by the police. I had to pick the kids out of identify the kids and all this stuff, right? And probably not, because what I was told, which I don't know if it was true or not, people give conflicting stuff. The one cop that was behind them said, "Thank you. We saw what you did," because he saw me like intentionally steer into them. And he's like, "Thanks for doing that, because we couldn't have caught them. We're not allowed to pursue."
Oh, okay.
And they were pursuing, so I don't know what he meant by that. I don't know if he meant they're not allowed to pit in the city, like pit maneuver, like
Right,
spin, or what it was. But the cop appreciated what I did, so that was great. That made me feel good.
Did you get to yell at him?
No, never got to go. Like once the cops are involved, there's definitely to identify them. I had to they brought them somewhere else. I had to park in this other spot, meet the police officer, ride in the squad car over with the window shade down so they couldn't see my face. And then they marched the kid out of the other cop, like the whole rigmarole, right? So no. I did actually, the funny thing was that was over a year ago. Only very recently, we got a letter from the city, talking about we can file victim impact statements for the situation, and what the name of the person and what they were charging the person with and all this. And I'm sure through that I could probably go yell at them in court, but I'm like, I just
You're not as elevated now.
Now I'm calmer now, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you got the satisfaction of actually seeing them go to jail and face some consequences for their actions, which
exactly
is hopefully going to be more impactful than a good yelling.
Hopefully.
From a neighbor
right?
or someone in the community. So hopefully they learn their lesson.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, good job.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. That's a fun one to close it out on, man. Yeah. It's a pleasure to meet you. I've been a big fan of everything that you've done through your career. I've watched from afar, and I'm more than excited to finally have a Hayduke in the barn. And I can't wait to go ride it and take it on some amazing adventures. And appreciate it, man. Had an absolute blast.
Have fun in Oaxaca.
I will. I think it's going to be hard to have a bad time in Oaxaca.
Yeah, right.
But now it's only going to be better. All right.
Thanks.
Well, safe travels to you, my friend, and hopefully we'll see you again in the future.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Bye.